Return to the past with a warehouse. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 401, Borrowing the East Wind. The queen was born and raised in the north, and her knowledge of Yu Yaoniang was not very good. Her knowledge was limited to important ladies outside the court and those she had seen and heard during the selection. She searched every corner of her memory, but could not think of anyone who could be the one. That concubine, she said. No wonder the third prince is obsessed with her. This person was a widow, which was even more strange. Don't keep us in suspense. Who is it? Since I know, tell me, and I will help you figure it out. Concubine Shu took a sip of tea, added a small spoonful of sugar, and said with a smile, who else could it be? A rising star in Yu Yaoniang, an official of Marquis Fengrang who His Majesty always talks about and wants to send to him whenever he gets something good. The bookkeeper surnamed Zhao. So it was her. No wonder. She is really good looking and capable. The queen really understood. Concubine Shu sighed. If she had been taken as a concubine or a side concubine, I'm sure His Majesty wouldn't have said anything. But the third brother insisted on making her the principal wife, so isn't that a stalemate? But I'm also curious, what kind of beauty is this that Sanlang described as being in heaven and on earth? I haven't seen her either. It's really strange. You know Lekang's temperament, as you've watched her grow up. Although she looks kind and popular, it's actually very difficult to get along with her. The Zhao girl has only met Lekang for a few days, but Lekang can actually treat her as a confidant. Isn't that very strange? Since Lekang went to Jinling that year, there have been only 30 or 40 letters in total, and half of them mentioned her. 7 or 8 times. He praised her for being charming and stunning. If my son were a boy, I would believe half of it, that a young man is in love, and that's what they call beauty in the eyes of the beholder, which makes sense. But my son is a girl. It can't be that she is blinded by love, right? Concubine Shu laughed twice. Is there such a saying? Ah, then I'm relieved. Since even the eldest princess likes her, it is not surprising that Sanlang likes her too. Our eldest girl's vision is not bad, and Sanlang is not as good as the eldest girl. Your Sanlang is also good. Kanja's vision is indeed not bad. The queen thought that the person the eldest princess liked and the prince consort chosen by her father were completely different. Thinking of this, the queen suddenly had an idea, but she was unwilling to say it out loud. Instead, she started talking about something else. Having said that, it is not a solution for the father and son to remain in a stalemate. What do you want to do? Concubine Shu sighed and said, Your Majesty will never give in. No matter what, you can't let a woman you have never seen before become the prince's consort. But the third child is a stubborn donkey. He won't back down, even if you lead him to move or beat him to retreat. I think we have to wait. Then, my idea is, why don't we find a way to call that woman to the capital, so that everyone can meet her? Or, His Majesty will agree. Or, the woman herself will decide to back down, then it's over, isn't it? The queen suggested. Concubine Shu thought about it, and felt that it was a good idea. Your Majesty is right. Originally, the prince's consort should be selected through selection. There are many people from Yu Yaoniang who participated in the selection, and it won't be a big deal to have one more person. If she is really chosen, this trip can shut up the gossips outside. If she withdraws on her own, there will be no problem. This is alright. But, what name should be used to summon her? Should the capital send someone to pick her up, or should the local authorities send her here? It just so happens that Lekang should be back soon, so let her bring Miss Zhao with her when she comes back, and they can go together. Who will care that the princess brought an extra person? There is no need to send extra people, nor to send her here from the local authorities, so there is no need to think of an excuse for the summons. It won't be too late to make up a name when the dust settles in the end. This is what the queen had in mind. I was thinking of having Marquis Fengrang escort them here. First, it has been 5 or 6 years since Marquis Fengrang was awarded the title, but he has never come to the capital to report on his work. Your Majesty has never met him, and all you know is that he has been sent letters. There is no guarantee that he will be promoted in the future. If he is not promoted, it would not be suitable for his talent, and it would be inappropriate. Second, I heard that the previous dynasty's experimental field was in an uproar, and the opposition in the capital was getting louder and louder. There were all kinds of strange and bizarre legends. Let him come in person to meet these people, and dispel the rumors. Third, your majesty intends to arrange a marriage for him, but he has said in advance that he must find a confidant and never have any other preferences. Your majesty also agreed and would not force it. Then, he has to choose the candidate for the marquis wife himself. It happened that in the name of this round of selection, all the outstanding unmarried girls in the world gathered in the capital. Who knows which one Marquis Fengrang chose? Concubine Shu had no doubts. I don't know about the affairs of the previous dynasty, only my sister knows. But I know about this marriage. Marquis Fengrang has high standards. Your majesty wants to grant him a marriage, but is afraid that he will not be happy. It's just the right opportunity to let Marquis Fengrang meet him in person, so that it will be appropriate and not afraid of causing trouble. My sister's idea is good. Our majesty is a truly benevolent and holy monarch. In the past dozens of generations, have you ever seen an emperor who indulges his subjects and considers his subjects so much? Concubine Shu praised her, and the empress also praised her. The two concubines made the decision. When His Majesty the Emperor and the third prince parted unhappily and came back to sulk, the empress and concubine Shu proposed this. His Majesty the Emperor often talked to the empress about the affairs of the outer court. When he heard the empress talk about the experimental fields, he didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Instead, he was very tempted by the empress's proposal. Marquis Fengrang was attacked by the court, which gave him a headache. It was not a solution to always smooth things over. Letting him deal with it himself was a solution. Seeing Zhao Sanjiu in person could also resolve the conflict between him and the third prince. The most important thing was that he could finally get that girl Lekang back. If he didn't do it now, he didn't know how long she would hide. The conscienceless little debt collector. His Majesty the Emperor smiled and asked someone to put dinner in the Pepper Room Hall and ate with the Queen and concubine Shu. Then he returned to the Ganlu Hall and immediately called the lecturer to draft the imperial edict, ordering Marquis Fengrang to escort Princess Chengyang back to the capital as soon as possible, and to bring his current secretary, Lady Zhao. At the same time, the Queen issued an edict to Lady Zhao, an official of Marquis Fengrang, inviting her to the capital. In the letter to Princess Chengyang, she also repeatedly told Chengyang to bring Lady Zhao with her. The matter of the third prince gave the Queen an excuse to recall Chengyang, and the Queen was not stingy in helping the third prince fulfill his wish. The stalemate between the third prince and His Majesty the Emperor is put aside for the time being. Marriage is only a part of their private life, and their lives are more important in public affairs. The three princes all returned safely from abroad, and each has their own understanding of the current empire. The eldest prince believes that the country is thriving everywhere, people are getting richer and richer, and everywhere is prosperous. The world today can be called a prosperous age, and he can't wait to shout out the concept of you ending prosperous age. He is not purely to please His Majesty the Emperor, he seriously thinks so. The second prince and the third prince both mentioned the hardships of the people. The difference is that the second prince talked about benevolent governance, how officials should treat the people kindly, how to comfort and herd the people, and talked about Confucianism and benevolent politics. The third prince talked about what kind of policies the people need, how to balance taxes, how to balance prices, how to ensure food security, how the central court can control the details of the local areas so that power will not fall into the hands of others, how the local areas should develop, the necessity of technical stations, building roads first to get rich, adapting to local conditions, and increasing per acre yields. The second prince is a typical Confucian. No, that's not right. His Majesty the Emperor thinks that the second prince is just using Confucianism to achieve his own goals, and even has a hidden interest in exchanging interests with the academic clique. As soon as the third prince opened his mouth, His Majesty the Emperor knew that this was Li Ju's apprentice. It was not abrupt, because before Li Ju came out of nowhere, the third prince had such a personality and cognition. At that time, He was limited by his experience and vision, and was not able to put his cognition into practice. He could only talk about making life easier for the people and being frugal. Now the third prince has roughly known what to do. His Majesty the Emperor did not comment much on this, because it was time for the new year, and everything would be dealt with after the new year. Chapter 402 Spring. The turmoil in the capital was secretive and obscure, and no one outside was aware of it. Willow buds sprouted, peaches were in bud, and the new year had arrived. Li Yuan's industries in Jinling were even larger. There were 40 or 50 managers under Sanjiu alone, and the number of permanent and temporary workers was 4 or 5 times that of Qingshan. In addition, the envoys sent from various provinces were crowded and could not accommodate them, which raised the rent of the surrounding houses by 30 or 40%. This year's spring festival, Li Ju first had a year-end banquet with the core members of Li Yuan in the Marquis Mansion and the school, and then went to the Yu Mansion with Sanjiu, Chuzan and others, stayed up with the Yu family, and listened to several lively operas sung by the Yu family's family troupe. The Yu and Li families were originally good friends. Fu Gaya was still studying at the Yu family. This year was Xiaolian's first year after marriage. Old Master Yu invited Li Ju to go, and Li Ju went there happily without thinking much. Fuji Yui passed the imperial examination last year, which was a big deal for the Fu family, so Li Ju took the time to invite Yu Jin and his wife, Yu Ai, Fu's father and mother, and 2 younger sisters to celebrate together. It was just a small celebration in private, and there was no movement outside. Fuji Yui will represent Li Ju in the future, and be stationed in the capital. A Jiren is really nothing, at least he has to be a Jinchi to be worth boasting about. There will be a joint examination in the spring of this year. Yunnan thinks that Fuji Yui is not good enough to pass the examination, so he did not let him sign up. The next one should be 3 years later. By then, Fuji Yui should have the confidence to take the exam. Moreover, the competition in the capital has not been clear this year, and Yunnan is also worried that Fuji Yui will be dragged down by Li Ju and fail. If Fuji Yui's strength is strong enough to convince the public, he will not be afraid of failing the exam this year. Tei-Fu Yang and others have to save face and dare not bear the crime of excluding dissidents and partisanship. Unfortunately, Fuji Yui's strength is not that high, and he was found to fail because of the problem, and no one can speak for him. Fuji Yui didn't know much about the situation in the upper echelons, and he didn't have enough experience, so he just listened to what Yunnan said. This year Yunnan tried his best to teach him, but after all, the time was short, and dealing with people, especially those in a circle of smart people, is a long and arduous process. Li Ju spent the new year at Yu's house, so it would be inconvenient for Chen Guiyang to go as well. So this was the first time that Chen Guiyang spent the new year alone in Jinling. In previous years, not only were there friends and relatives to accompany him, but he could also go to the Dayan club to watch a play. This year, it was so deserted that Chen Guiyang was really not used to it, but if he had to go back like this, Chen Guiyang always felt that something was wrong. After all, it was the 3rd day of the new year, and each family began to visit each other. The women of the Yu mansion next door, Sanjiu, Yu Yaoniang and others came to visit one after another, which dispelled Chen Guiyang's occasional homesickness. Sanjiu also brought various dividends from Chen Guiyang. Although Chen Guiyang looked down on that little money, he gave it to the long-term and short-term workers and managers of various industries, but the fun of eating dividends was enough to enjoy. After the first month of the year, the envoys from Wazhou, Fanzhou, and Yanzhou, including Yang Daling, set off to return home one after another. The envoys from Lingnan and other 3 provinces who arrived later had to participate in spring plowing to practice the paper knowledge they learned with their own hands. There were also envoys from more distant places such as Guangxi, Kyangui, and Mo, and it was another round of learning. There are precedents for this, and there is no need for additional arrangements. What is worth Li Ju's attention is that the technical point of Jinling City finally built the first steam engine. This steam engine is clumsy and complicated. Li Ju estimates that its actual working efficiency is less than 1%, but it has been built after all. Unlike the demand-driven power evolution in another world, the steam engine in this plane was completely built by Li Ju with the giants of various industries and the enthusiastic dignitaries of Chen Guiyang's level. Therefore, after building such a strange looking machine, even the craftsman who built it did not realize its importance. According to the development law of the modern plane, the prototype of the steam engine is a machine used to pump water. It was first popularized in coal mines and became familiar to people. When dealing with it, people gradually explored ways to improve it and found the way to the internal combustion engine. There is demand, knowledge accumulation, and enough people who are familiar with it and understand it. These are the conditions for improvement. Li Ju could not provide such conditions in Jiangnan, so he could only pave the way and wait for the brave men under the heavy reward to wait. Fortunately, the result was as expected, and the matter was done. Chen Guiyang, Fu Jiyue, and Yu Fu all knew that Li Ju had taken great pains to make the steam engine, and they made an appointment to congratulate Li Ju together. However, after eating and drinking, everyone was still confused about how such a strange thing could be used in textiles and carriages. Li Ju was in a good mood. He gave the craftsman money to take a holiday. Then he had to do two things. The first was to send the steam engine manufacturing drawings to other places that were also studying the technical points of steam engines for reference. The second was to combine the steam engine as a power source with other industries. Technical work that requires brain power is not Li Ju's specialty. Li Ju still intends to use the previous method, that is, to directly point out the way and let the craftsman realize it. Although it is a case of pulling up the seedlings to help them grow, it is effective quickly, saves time, and can also appease the various joint ventures that have invested money in the technical station. They spent money, but only saw such a machine that they don't know how to use, and they don't know what they are muttering in their hearts. If it wasn't Li Ju who took the lead, I'm afraid that the stall would be overturned if someone else took over. Li Ju had just finished copying the drawings here, and before he had time to send them to King Shenzhou's Hangang and other places, it was late spring, and the edicts, letters, and hints from Chang'an were thrown down. It was not unexpected that His Majesty the Emperor ordered Li Ju to escort Princess Chen Guiyang to Beijing and report on his work. Li Ju felt that it was too late to receive the order to report today. Almost all officials of Dayang report once a month and once a year. It has been so many years since Li Ju did this. As for escorting Chen Guiyang, it is understandable that the emperor and the queen are worried about their daughter's long journey, so they want to ask Li Ju, who has a good relationship with Chen Guiyang and has a high martial arts value, to escort her. It is reasonable. Li Ju was surprised that His Majesty the Emperor specifically emphasized that he should bring his current subordinate Yu Yaoniang with him. This is amazing. When Li Ju reported Zhao Sanjiu for the position of subordinate, he had already reported Zhao Sanjiu's life experience and experience in detail. Li Ju couldn't think of a reason for His Majesty the Emperor to add such an exhortation. Chen Guiyang on the other side received the Queen's edict and letter, and vaguely guessed his parents' plan. Because she was just guessing, and the reputation of the third prince and Zhao Sanjiu was involved, Chen Guiyang didn't mention her guess, but asked Li Ju, if His Majesty the Emperor doesn't let him come back this time, Jinling must have someone to take care of it and participate in the interpersonal relations. Who does he prefer? Li Ju didn't hear the implication of Chen Guiyang anyway, and replied, I guess it will be Yu Yaoniang. She has learned a lot from Sanjiu and me over the years. Although she doesn't have Sanjiu's determination, she is still a good leader with her own ideas and decisiveness. In addition to her, if I think about it, it's Chuzan and Shiba, who have been with me for many years, and are also suitable. Chapter 403 Heading North. Chen Guiyang couldn't say openly, I think your Miss Sanjiu can't be saved. It's better to bring Yu Yaoniang out as soon as possible. So he could only say in a suggestion, listen to my idea, since His Majesty asked you to bring your subordinates, it means that His Majesty wants to meet the subordinates of Marquis Fengrang. Since Yu Yaoniang, Chusan and Shibei are all your confidants, if you want to leave Jinling and go to other places in the future, you can immediately bring an official with you, which can save some trouble. Besides, the three of them, as well as your housekeeper and accountant, have followed you for many years, and they are just wandering around in this 3 miles of Lee Garden. It would be better to take those who are free to go to the capital to have a look. If you want to buy a house or property, there will be someone to take care of it. Li Ju never cared about these things. Chen Guiyang's words sounded reasonable, and it seemed like he was going to take the whole family outing. He thought that Yu Yaoniang, Chusan and Shibei had followed him since they were very young, and until now they had never asked for a vacation or to go out to play, so it would be easy to make arrangements. Your Highness, what you said makes sense. I will go back and discuss it with them. I will just take it as a holiday. It's just that the matter of the technical station, will it be delayed? Li Ju was a little worried about the people who were still in class. Chen Guiyang calculated and said, no. After you finish teaching the third group of people and send them to practice, we will set off. I counted the courses, but it will only take more than a month. When the fourth group arrives, won't they have to adjust for half a month and then take a few months of general education courses? There will be 2 or 3 months of free time in between. Even if they can't catch up for a while, it doesn't matter. The assistant teachers in the school will be enough for a while. In addition, your steam engine has been made, but it's a pity that the world doesn't know how powerful it is, and it can't be explained in a few words. Why not take it to the capital? Whether you are doing an experiment or really installing it on a loom or a carriage, as long as everyone can see it, it's seeing is believing. Isn't it much easier in the future? Li Ju asked again. What you said makes sense, but you have to wait for me for another month. Chen Guiyang smiled and said, silly Marquis, you don't dislike ceremonials. I said I was going home today, but after packing up everything here, it will take at least a month to set off. It's not just a casual outing. His Majesty has to build a palace, or prepare routes and receptions half a year or a year in advance for his tour. We dare not compete with His Majesty, but we also have to tell you in advance. We can't just leave as soon as we say we will. Li Ju was educated by Chen Guiyang on how long it takes for a proper noble to prepare a house before going on a long journey, how long it takes for decorations and clothes to be delivered, how many clothes, jewelry, cooks, money, and people to bring, etc. Chen Guiyang was already a very frugal person, and a simple calculation showed that it was an astronomical number. Li Ju scratched his head. Your Highness, are you implying that I live a rough life? I really can't live meticulous life. If I haven't taken good care of you along the way, please forgive me. With the master here, it can't be considered bad in any case. What's the big deal about daily life? I'm not someone who can't afford to eat. Mental happiness is the most important thing. The master himself often said, it's rare to find someone who knows one's heart in life, and I think so too. I'd love to have the master to send me off. Chen Guiyang's words were quite explicit, but unfortunately Li Ju was a straight man and didn't hear it at all. Chen Guiyang was also used to Li Ju's slowness, which was not bad from another perspective. So, the Marquis Mansion, the Princess Mansion and the Internal Affairs Department began to prepare for going to the capital. Chen Guiyang had established precedents and account books, so it didn't take too much manpower to carefully check and pack. This was the first time that Li Ju traveled with the identity of Marquis and ceremonial guards, so there were many things to do. Even if he traveled with the simplest specifications, the messy melon axes and flags were indispensable. Li Ju didn't have such a ceremonial guard, so when the time came, he had to borrow people from the Yu family and the Yu family. If it was a prominent family in the capital who had to borrow ceremonial guards for a long journey, they would become a laughing stock on the same day. In the end, it was old Master Yu who couldn't stand it anymore and took it over to Li Ju. The luggage for the trip was another big problem. Usually, Li Ju wore casual clothes and regular clothes when he went out, and he could just roll up a few wear-resistant clothes and go. This time was different. He had to wear robes in the clothing system almost the whole time, so Zhao Sanjiu had to find a few temporary workers who were good at sewing to make some compliant clothes for Li Ju, himself and others. Finally, it was the selection of people. Sanjiu had to go. The mute was almost Li Ju's shadow. He went wherever Li Ju went, without much thought. Li Ju also wanted to take Yu Yaoniang, the old Wu family, Wang Dezhen, Chu Sanlang, and Shivalang to take a look together. In addition, Sun Mama, who was given to Li Ju by Chen Guiyang to be in charge of the affairs of the inner house, would also go to Beijing with him. There is a problem of division of labor here. These people have very important tasks on hand. It is easy to leave, but who will take over the work? the mansion, the school, the technical station, the manor, the industry. Which place can be separated from Sanjiu and others? Suzy K is easy to use, but his identity is still a little question mark for Li Ju. Li Ju is not afraid of his greed for money, not afraid of him making false accounts, not afraid of him secretly spreading information and technology. Li Ju is only worried that he will do some things to oppress the people and compete with others for profit under the banner of the mansion. There have been many such people before, but they were taken down before they became successful. There are always people who forget their roots when they come out. Not only can they not bring their former poor brothers to get rich together, but they turn around and suck blood. Li Ju did not want to test people's hearts, so Suzy K could be used, but he did not dare to let him use it. In the end, Yu Fu and Fu Gui solved this problem. Yu Fu had been entrusted by Li Ju to manage the school in Qingshan. Now that Li Ju is out, he will take charge of the school and other matters related to the school and the technical station. Fu Gui asked for leave from Yu's house and came back to Li Yuan to take care of his master's property. He had managed the family business for Li Ju many times in Qingshan before, and now he was just getting used to it. Yuai followed Fu Gui without hesitation, mainly to take care of the affairs involving the female family members. The last step was to determine the candidates to be brought to Beijing. All those who were called went, but the old lady of the Wu family was too old and might feel uncomfortable on the bumpy road, so she stayed. She could also take care of Ning, the wife of manager Liu. In addition to these old people, Li Ju also asked for Jeteng, Gizi and other next generation backbones of Li Yuan who were favored by Sanjiu and others, to be included in the entourage. He didn't ask for anything else, just to let them open their eyes and see the outside world. In addition, Li Ju also brought Zhao Zhangan with him, so that he could continue to improve the steam engine on the road. The guards who escorted them to the capital included the mutant Yu Yaoniang, who were clearly in charge of their positions. In addition, there were guards from the Imperial Army, assigned to Chengyang by the Emperor, and a team of soldiers assigned to Li Ju by the Jinling Wubei camp. The total number of the Li family was 51, and Chengyang had 700 or 800 people, with countless carriages and boats. Li Ju even doubted why the princess wanted him to escort her with such a ceremonial procession. Chengyang only said, "Maybe your majesty wants to meet with you to have a detailed talk. What escorting me is just an excuse," and Li Ju actually believed it. It is true that he has done a lot of big things in recent years, and it is true that it is difficult to explain in detail in the letters. It is true that the news heard from Yan'an said that the emperor blocked many impeachments and attacks on Li Ju, and it is true that he and the emperor have not met face to face for so many years. There are many things and many doubts, and they can only be solved by seeing them with your own eyes and talking face to face. In this way, they attended classes during the day and prepared for the trip and sorted out handover matters at night. They were busy for about 40 days. Seeing that the weather would get hot if they didn't set out and the plum rain would be coming soon, everyone looked for a fine day with clear skies, bid farewell to Jinling, and boarded a ship to the north. Chapter 404, Arrival in Beijing. On the way to the capital, Li Ju stayed in his room, either drawing blueprints or copying books. He studied by himself and taught his followers who were eager for knowledge. Princess Chengyang was patient at first and resisted looking for Li Ju. Later, she found that even Han Jiao and Lan Jin often went to the place where Li Ju copied books to listen to his lectures. It seemed so natural for anyone to go to Li Ju's study, so Chengyang followed him. When Princess Chengyang was in Jinling, she would wear a princess's dress except for formal public occasions. She always wore men's clothes to meet people. Most of the time, she followed the third prince and Li Ju to work in the fields. She also got used to the simple robes in brown, blue, and black. Over time, Li Ju almost forgot that Princess Chengyang was also a bright woman in her prime. Now Chengyang must wear clothes that match her status. It doesn't have to be a dress, but clothes that are suitable for her status when traveling. Silk, gauze, yarn, etc. Thin and bright cloths were made into Beijing-style skirts with a Jiangnan style. the powder palace makeup, the golden hairpins and green curling hairpins, the fragrance of the clothes made by the sandalwood, the phoenix brought the bright moon, the engraved and inlaid gold bracelets, and the hanging skirts with pearls and jade rings. Although not very gorgeous, she was rich and dignified, charming and romantic. What kind of emotions and attitudes did she not have? Li Ju slowly realized that Chen Guiyang was also a delicate and weak woman. When Chen Guiyang was in Jinling, she rarely mentioned poems and songs and other pure literary and artistic texts. At most, she casually praised the exquisiteness of Songguozi, Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Journey to the West, and memorized the poetry collections copied by Li Ju. There was nothing else. However, when Li Ju copied books on the boat and on the road, he sometimes extended it to other key points of the classics. Li Ju had to think about it, but Chen Guiyang could basically blurt it out. In terms of knowledge alone, Li Ju is not necessarily better than Chen Guiyang. Chen Guiyang has received the top education of the royal family since childhood. He is smart and studious and can endure any learning. Li Ju grew up in the army. He studied hard during the compulsory education stage. After joining the army, he spent almost all his time in training. His cultural level is really not as high as Chen Guiyang. Chen Guiyang only loses in the breadth of knowledge, but not in the depth of understanding and application of knowledge. And Chen Guiyang also saw another Li Ju. Earlier in the school, Li Ju saw that she gave a good lecture, so he let her be the main lecturer for a few days. At that time, Chen Guiyang knew that Li Ju had no worries and only looked at ability when hiring people. At this time, he saw that Li Ju was humble and respectful. He did not flatter because she was a princess, nor did he neglect her because she was a woman. When he should ask for advice, he was polite. When she pointed out the fallacies or contradictions, he did not feel ashamed and annoyed, but listened to her opinions and made revisions. When he should argue with her, he did not avoid arguing with her, and never deliberately gave in, because of her identity and gender. Chen Guiyang had long known that Li Ju was different from ordinary people. His care for women was not "I give in to you, because you are weak, but what you said makes sense, so I listen to you." His uprightness towards the princes and princesses was not like some Confucian scholar's character setting of "I will not bend to the powerful, but if you are wrong, I will correct you." As a result, the relationship between the two became closer and closer. They were friends before, and gradually became confidants, and on top of confidants, they appreciated each other a little more. However, Li Ju did not think about other things, and Chen Guiyang did not dare to think one step further, so the relationship stopped at this moment. If there is no external force, Chen Guiyang will certainly not get married again, and Li Ju will probably feel that every woman he meets in the future is not the one he likes. So the opportunity is wonderful, and it seems to have its own logic and reason. From Jinling to the capital, water and land are interspersed along the way. Thanks to the rail transportation system, the speed of returning to the capital is much faster than when Chen Guiyang came to Jinling. It was safe and sound without any major setbacks. In less than 2 months, they arrived at the ferry in the capital, and were picked up by the second and third princes in the Ministry of Internal Affairs who were ordered to meet them. Chen Guiyang and Li Ju parted at the ferry. Chen Guiyang went directly back to the palace to pay respects to his parents, while Li Ju had to settle down at the post station in the capital, and then live in the post station or rent a house by himself. In short, settle down and wait for the emperor's summons. The waiting time was shorter than Li Ju imagined. They entered the city early in the morning, settled down in the morning, and lived in an inner city house, provided by Yang Mengson. Just after putting down their luggage, washing up, and eating 2 bites of Chang'an's millet steamed buns, there was an order from the palace that the emperor summoned Li Ju and ordered Li Ju and his officials and guards to meet him at 5 p.m. and give him a dinner. Li Ju's officials and guards were all awarded by the emperor. It was reasonable to summon Li Ju and his officials and guards at this time, and no one had other ideas. So Li Ju hadn't even finished his meal when he was pulled up by the retainers, staff, and housekeepers sent by Mama Sun and Yang Mengson to help him. His face had to be cleaned up, his hair had to be carefully tied up, and he had to wear a white silk midriff, a red gauze robe, a 7-beam crown, a jade belt and black boots. Li Ju was so exhausted that he was about to fall apart. Mama Sun wanted to put some powder on Li Ju, but Li Ju was so scared that he ran out of the door. Mama-san had to put down the powder box and sighed. A good gentleman. If you don't put on some powder, you won't look like the master of a big family. Li Ju would rather not look like a master than put on powder. Sanjiu was supposed to wear official clothes to meet the emperor. Sun got a hint from Yu Yaoniang and knew that 1/3 of the reason why the emperor summoned Li Ju this time was because of Sanjiu. So she persuaded Sanjiu to wear the formal dress of a lady of honor and dressed Sanjiu up carefully with several invited mamas. According to the emperor and the empress's preferences, she must be both elegant and pretty, with clear eyes and eyebrows, round and smooth, with a fair face and rosy cheeks, and a beautiful body. Sanjiu was already very beautiful, and after being dressed up like this, she was even more radiant and dazzling. The mothers had seen so many beauties that they really liked Sanjiu. Sun thought it was reasonable for the third prince to want to marry, so she naturally didn't say anything, and only taught her the etiquette of the palace in detail. Sun saw that Sanjiu was a little nervous, and was afraid that she would make mistakes in the confusion, so she said, "The emperor and the queen are both kind and benevolent. Don't be nervous, and don't be afraid of making mistakes. Even if you make a mistake, just correct it. Don't get hung up on the details. You are familiar with our eldest daughter's master. The two masters are the father and mother of the eldest princess. If you think about it this way, you are meeting your friend's parents, so there is nothing to be afraid of." Sanjiu was just wondering why the emperor summoned Li Jiayu to ask about government affairs, and the queen was also among them. I have never heard that the emperor had the queen accompany his ministers. However, Sun had been in the palace for decades, so naturally she knew more. Sun said it was not a big deal, so Sanjiu believed it was a common thing. The matter of the mutant Wei Jialian was even simpler. This dynasty has never paid much attention to the military officer system. The emperor would not ask them questions and would not care about the behavior of the guards. It was enough to make no mistakes on the surface. The mutant Wei Jialian both changed into the guards' uniforms, cleaned their hands, faces and necks, and were almost the same. The mute was inevitably afraid, but he was one of the guards given by the emperor, and unlike Wei Jialian who was personally selected by the emperor was obviously going to take a closer look at everyone around Li Ju this time, and he couldn't avoid this test anyway. Wei Jialian had no choice but to teach him etiquette, and told the mute to follow him and not get separated. There were many taboos in the palace, and the mute couldn't speak. If he accidentally got lost and went to a place he shouldn't go, he wouldn't be able to defend himself, and he would inevitably cause trouble. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 405 Arrangement. Li Ju and the mute had learned a little bit of etiquette when they were awarded in previous years. They reviewed it before the battle, and with the help of the eunuchs, Wei Jialiang and Sun Mama, they were able to pick it up quickly. The eunuchs who came to deliver the imperial order were entertained. They saw that Li Ju and Lady Zhao treated them like ordinary people. There was no curious look from other people who saw eunuchs for the first time, and there was no strange emotion of pity, contempt, or flattery. They were happy to make friends with this favorite minister of the emperor in recent years. So the leading eunuch, after Li Ju personally introduced the tea and fruit made in the south of the Yangtze River, smiled and said, "It's time for me to go back and report. Lord Marquis, please rest assured. I have been following my master in the palace for so many years, and I have never seen the emperor treat anyone the same way as Lord Marquis. Even if they are capable nephews. You can see that Lord Marquis is also like a nephew favored by the emperor in his heart. If you are like a local official entering the court, it will take 10 days or half a month to prepare and wait for the emperor's order. Unless there is an urgent report, it can be arranged temporarily. Before Lord Marquis entered the city, the emperor would ask 3 times a day. Today, after entering the city, the emperor could not wait a moment and summoned you to the palace to explain in detail. It can be seen that the emperor loves you very much. Some etiquette and trivial matters are not very important. Lord Marquis is a respectable person, and we have the respect of the Lord Marquis. When you are undecided, ask me privately, and I will tell you everything I know. Li Ju knew that since ancient times, those who were in charge of the affairs of the superior were the most capable of controlling people. Although he did not understand why daily tea, fruit, and snacks meal was a clear sign of goodwill, it meant that the emperor was in a good mood. So Li Ju accepted the favor, thanked him, and asked Sanjiu to take out some gifts and send the eunuchs back to report. Li Ju was busy arranging things and reviewing etiquette before the battle. The emperor was absent-mindedly discussing politics, and the queen was another scene. Before Chen Guiyang returned to the palace, the queen thought, when she comes back, I will leave her alone for 3 days, to let her know what it means to be worried. After Chen Guiyang returned to the palace, the queen did not remember her angry words at all, and had been eagerly waiting for 7 or 8 days. When Chen Guiyang came in, the queen got down from the couch, took Chen Guiyang's hand, and looked at him twice. Her eyes were red. My son, how come you have lost so much weight? You can't eat your favorite dishes outside. Today, the small kitchen has made 50 or 60 dishes that you like the most. Please eat more. Chen Guiyang answered seriously, Mother, you are wrong. I weighed myself before I came. I'm much heavier. If you say that my hands are rough and my face is darker, it is true. If you say that I have lost weight, then you are definitely wrong. Yang Jiao and other maids who served the queen laughed for a while. Chen Guiyang had been gone for 3 years, and his appearance had not changed much, but his temperament and demeanor had changed a lot. It was hard to say what was different, but he looked more heroic and stronger, and there were some muscle lines on his arms. The queen said that Chen Guiyang had lost weight, which was naturally groundless. The queen was so angry that she hit her twice. You little heartless girl, you come back to ruin my plan. Go change your clothes quickly, have a couple of cups of sweet food, and wait for your father to come off the court, and then go to see him to pay your respects and ask about his health. Your father has to discuss government affairs in the afternoon, so he will not have time to bother with you for too long. If you go again in the evening, it will be terrible. You won't let me rest all night. The queen had a plan in mind. She sent her daughter to pay her respects while the emperor was having tea in the morning. The emperor would not delay the afternoon government affairs and would definitely let her daughter come back before midday. If she went again in the evening, the emperor would not have any special arrangements at night, but just rest and recuperate. There would be plenty of time to chat with her daughter. The chat between mother and daughter is completely different from the chat between parents and children. The queen had a lot of problems in her mind, and she didn't want the emperor to spoil her interest, so she had to get rid of the emperor as soon as possible. Chen Guiyang responded with 2 RAHS and changed into a new set of clothes made this year. When the court was dismissed, he could go to Ganlu Palace to pay respects. The queen personally picked out jewelry for Chen Guiyang. Yang Jiao combed her hair, tied her hair, and put on powder. The queen carefully selected a pair of shoes with bees chasing butterflies and inlaid with pearls for Chen Guiyang. She matched them with a brocade skirt with peony bees and flowers, a sueluo jacket with flowing water and falling flowers, and a hangeluo shirt with 8 treasures and dark patterns. The colors were light green and apricot yellow. She wore a gold frame with pearls on her waist. On her head was a small phoenix with pearls inserted diagonally, and several pearls as big as thumbs were inlaid. The small phoenix was strung with fresh colored glass beads, and the pearls were all light pink. The necklace, armlet, and earrings she wore were also changed to the style of gathering beads. She looked fresh and pretty. After Chen Guiyang got married, the palace did not store any of her belongings. The existing ones were all new clothes and jewelry made by the empress for the 3 years since she left, which the empress had asked the palace maids of the Ministry of Internal Affairs in the pepper room to make. Although they were new, at first glance, they were also styles that had been out of fashion in Jiangnan for several years. The backwardness in fashion became more and more serious. In addition to the fact that the economic conditions were left behind by several horse bodies, resulting in fewer people who could pursue fashion and renovate, the reasons of the atmosphere could not be ignored. Chang'an was conservative and old-fashioned. Speaking of conservatism and old-fashionedness, Chen Guiyang wanted to sigh. However, because she was happy to see her parents, she put aside this little worry for the time being. She put on the clothes as the empress instructed and grabbed a Xiangfei bamboo silk peony fan with golden butterflies and bees, and she was a rich and beautiful woman again. I always feel that something is different. The empress looked at her daughter from left to right again. It seemed that she looked a little different from the dusty look when she came back just now. She was not as lively as before, but she really couldn't see any problems, so she had to let it go. She also told her daughter not to stumble there and to come back early, etc. The result was just as the queen expected. When the emperor saw his beloved daughter, he immediately turned into an ordinary old father, asking endless questions about every detail. The council hall repeatedly asked Li Ju to wait outside to see the emperor after the council meeting, which made the emperor reluctant to send his daughter back to the pepper room. Before sending her back, the emperor thought for a moment and said, girl, don't go out, now that you are here. There is nothing good outside, and your mother and I are worried about you being alone outside. In addition, in the past 2 years, your brothers have married, or are going to school, and they are all going to leave the palace. Your sister is also of marriageable age. Once they leave, the palace will inevitably be a little lonely, so if you stay, it will be more lively. The princess's mansion outside can be used for relaxation, and you can live in the side hall on your mother's side. When the princesses are out, you can choose one from the Mirren Hall in the south and the Ganglin Hall in the west as your residence. How about it? Chen Guiyang didn't think it was a good idea. She was freer outside. Besides, which princess would live in a palace alone? Even if it was not a proper concubine's palace, it would be embarrassing to say it out. Your daughter knows all about father's good intentions. I'll live with my mother first, but I haven't had time to talk to her in detail for so many years. I'm unfilial. These days I just want to honor my father and mother, and I'll make plans for other things later. It's good that I live with my mother now, and she naturally thinks it's a good thing. Wouldn't it be necessary to add 100 or 200 more people to the palace if we move? You can go back and have a detailed talk with Marquis Feng Rang, and you'll know that saving every person and every penny now will bring you dozens or hundreds of times the return in the future. Why spend more time on these things? I've heard a little about Marquis Feng Rang's ability to turn stone into gold. I happened to summon him this afternoon, so I'll have a detailed talk. His Majesty the Emperor thought about today's arrangements and said, I've invited Marquis Feng Rang to have supper with me tonight, and your mother will be there too. I thought it would be better to include you in the group. What do you think? You've worked with him a lot in Jiangnan, so it shouldn't be too abrupt. Chapter 406, Signs. Chen Guiyang ignored her father's question and just said, it's up to father to arrange it. As long as it doesn't cause trouble to father and mother, I can do anything. His Majesty the Emperor has always loved this daughter the most. Hearing this, he felt even more distressed. Well, it depends on your own time. Come if you want to, and don't come if you don't want to. If you come, we will treat it as a family dinner, and the family will be harmonious, and talk about the scenery of Jiangnan. If you don't come, I will send Marquis Feng Rang out early, and the two of us will go to your mother to ask her for her new snacks made with sweet potatoes and wild potatoes. Chen Guiyang pursed her lips and smiled, said goodbye and went back to the pepper room. Ziking, who was talking to Chen Guiyang, hurriedly told the queen about the emperor's plan. His Majesty also said that he would allocate a palace for our master to live in. Your Majesty, if you look back at the old almanacs of several decades ago, even princes and princes rarely lived in a palace alone in the palace, but our eldest daughter had one first. However, I don't know what our eldest daughter thought, but she refused. Your Majesty, just think about it, how glorious it will be if this matter is spread out. The queen was very happy to hear this, but seeing Chen Guiyang's steady and calm demeanor, she knew that she would not agree. Your Majesty is thoughtful, but Kanja will definitely not be happy. If this arrangement is really made, people outside will definitely make up something. In fact, living in a palace alone is only good in name. Usually, you have to walk so far back and forth to pay respects. I feel so distressed when it is hot or snowy. It is better for him to live here with me. We mother and daughter will be happy to see each other every day, and there will be less gossip outside. What do you think, Kanja? That's what I mean. Ziking showed an expression of so that's why I came here, and said, there is one more thing. Didn't His Majesty invite Marquis Fengrang to the palace this afternoon? The Queen nodded. Yes, what's the matter? His Majesty said that, since our girl has some friendship with Marquis Fengrang, and Marquis Fengrang also sent our eldest girl all the way, and the Queen will be here tonight, it's not wrong to invite the eldest girl to join us as a family dinner. Your Majesty, when has anyone been worthy of your Majesty's consideration so much? It's just the Queen and the eldest girl. When you went to Jiangnan, you became a Jiangnan person in both your words and your heart. You kept calling her eldest girl. I had to think for a moment before I realized you were talking about Kanja. Very interesting. The Queen felt very comfortable with what she said, and she casually said these two words of family matters. The Queen's own position is as stable as a mountain. It doesn't matter whether His Majesty wants it or not. No matter who the new emperor is, she will be the Queen Mother. What is there to worry about? Only Chengayang made her worry. His Majesty was thinking about Chengayang, so her life could be easy, unless she could find a very good prince consort. The world was like this, and even a princess was no exception. The Queen looked at Chengayang and said, "Come too." His Majesty also summoned Miss Zhao, and I guess he wanted to keep her for a family dinner. With you here, the girl would feel more comfortable. Chengayang was very happy in her heart, but she couldn't show it. She bowed calmly after hearing the words, and then retreated to the room and hurriedly began to choose clothes to dress up. It had to be in line with her status, in line with Li Ju's peculiar aesthetics, and magnificent so that her parents would like it. This was too difficult. In the end, Chengayang chose a new dress that Sanjiu had bought for her, a pink long gown with big sleeves, swaying and flowing. Underneath was a soft grass green pleated skirt with a faint pattern of dark flowered gauze. Almost all the jewelry was replaced with the more popular velvet flowers in Jiangnan, with green wheat seedlings and rice ears, furry bees and green peaches, and a few fiery red pomegranate flowers as bright colors. Pomegranate means having many seeds, which is also popular in the palace. It is cheap and labor intensive, and the ingenuity of the flower maker is particularly valued. Chengayang's whole outfit reflects Sanjiu's aesthetics, which also represents Li Ju's aesthetics. When the emperor saw his daughter's new clothes, he said that they were beautiful, but because he was afraid that it would cause competition among the harem and lead to unnecessary expenses, he said, "It is only suitable for good daughters. No one else is suitable." Well, the Queen is also suitable. The Queen smiled and said, "I'm not used to wearing this. It is only bright when worn by little girls." And, what is this called female beauty? Chengayang's heart tightened when she heard it, and she grabbed her mother's sleeve in a panic. The Queen had not received such treatment for many years. She smiled again, and took her daughter's arm to the side hall of the Qianlong Palace where the emperor summoned Li Ju. Li Ju entered the palace, and waited before 3 p.m. The waiting time was the most difficult to endure. If he offended the eunuchs, it would be even more uncomfortable. However, Li Ju had the emperor's favor and the care of the previous eunuchs. He was not a tactless and busybody. Naturally, this round of waiting was arranged very well. There were tea, snacks, incense, toys, and treasures to relieve boredom, and 2 smart eunuchs ready to answer Li Ju's questions at any time. The court gave Li Ju the best treatment within the scope of rules and etiquette. When the third prince came back from hearing the government, he heard that Li Ju and Sanjiu had entered the palace. He hurriedly asked the emperor for a favor, and ran to the Qianlong Palace to reminisce about the past with Li Ju. As soon as he entered the room, the third prince first saw Sanjiu, who was standing on the right side of Li Ju, and his eyes lit up. He stared at Sanjiu until she was a little angry. Then he blushed and bowed to Li Ju. "Sir, you are here. I just learned the news. Otherwise I would have left the palace early to wait for you at your house. I came here in a hurry and didn't even change my clothes or make any preparations. I'm so rude. Please forgive me, sir." Li Ju didn't care about these things. He stood up and returned the greeting, saying, "I heard that your highness is already in charge of government affairs and will soon be in charge of local affairs. We should congratulate your highness." The third prince scratched his arm naively and said, "I was supposed to do something, so it can't be considered congratulations. Speaking of this, I have to ask you for help. I wanted to go to the Ministry of Works to supervise the construction of bridges and roads, water conservancy and farmland in various places, but your majesty transferred me to the Ministry of Revenue. I'm having a headache here. I would like to find a time to have a detailed and sincere talk with you, sir, and ask for your advice. The Ministry of Revenue is the department that is most related to the national economy and people's livelihood. It can be seen that His Majesty the Emperor values the third prince. However, the things here are the most difficult to handle. Since ancient times, the Ministry of Revenue has been a lucrative job. Needless to say, the joints, connections, and veins between the upper and lower levels are complicated and intriguing, and can even hang up His Majesty's harem. This is all the surface situation. In depth, the Ministry of Revenue is in charge of the world's taxes, treasury, and internal treasury. This is why there are 5 major factions in it, including imperial power, prime minister power, including top wealthy families, big landlords and wealthy businessmen, small peasant economy, and emerging economy, which jointly produce and distribute. None of these 5 factions is easy to mess with. Any one of them can suppress the other 2 if it is strong. Any conflict between any 2 will cause the country to fall into a long-term struggle or even go directly to destruction. The current situation in Daeong is good, because the imperial power is unprecedentedly strong and the cake of the world has not been divided up. The imperial power wants to maintain this dynasty the most, so it will consider more. When the imperial power is sober and not blinded, it is more kind to the obedient people. However, this kind of sobriety is very dependent on the personal ability and personal morality of the emperor at that time, and is not very reliable. There is still a surplus of the pie of the world, which means that any force that is squeezed to the edge can still scrape a piece of the unowned pie to fill its stomach, and will not be forced into a desperate situation. The current emperor is brave and virtuous, and he is also smart. The country is in an upward stage, where the world wants peace and recuperation, and it is thriving everywhere, so the overall situation of Daeong is not bad. But some things have already shown signs in the Ministry of Revenue. Chapter 407, First Meeting. Li Ju has been attacked more and more in the past 2 years. In fact, it is also because more and more people's interests have been touched by him. The situation that the third prince is about to face in the Ministry of Households is inseparable from Li Ju stirring up troubles in recent years. Li Ju's technical station and joint venture have been striving for the right to speak for the small peasant economy and the emerging economy, and inevitably have conflicts with the landlords, wealthy businessmen, and wealthy families above. This contradiction is manifested in the academic field as contempt for the technical station's clerk system and suppression of Li Yuan's miscellaneous studies. In the court field, it is manifested as the exclusion of Li Ju and even Yunnan. Specifically in the Ministry of Households, it is manifested as a tendency contradiction in a series of economic distribution policies such as taxes and people's books. The third prince has done his homework for a few days, and knows what kind of deep pits are waiting for him inside, which makes him feel very headache. But this is inevitable. Li Ju did not directly tell the third prince what he wanted to do. In terms of the emperor's mind, political struggle, and power struggle, he is far worse than the third prince and others who have been exposed to it since childhood. But Li Ju is purer and more direct. The third prince explained the current situation of the Ministry of Revenue, especially the contradictions surrounding tax collection, to Li Ju one by one, and finally summarized, "This is the situation. It was caused by a memorial from Governor Zaya. The taxes on commerce and workshops in Huajia County and the entire Lingbei Road skyrocketed, so Governor Zaya requested to try out the Dingmu silver tax system in Huajia County. First, all taxes and corvée labor were converted into money and sent to the national treasury. Second, no longer collect population taxes, but all are changed to land taxes, and whoever has more land will pay more taxes. In general, he requested to adjust the tax structure, and the amount of land tax is linked to the price of grain, and the amount of commercial tax is linked to the profit ratio. With this one item alone, the amount of tax paid by sea merchants who make more than 10 times the profit in more than 10,000 taels of silver will be as much as 40%. The next is what I just said. The group headed by Fang Wenyi disagrees with the land tax, and Wuzhuxi's group demands that 80% of the tax be paid on business, to prevent the abandonment of agriculture due to business. Now that there is still a big quarrel outside, I think the Ministry of Revenue is even more in dire straits. I was just worried that there was no one to discuss with, but it happened that you came, didn't you? When Li Ju heard this, isn't this just the plus version of the Yi Xiao Bian Far exceeding room Yu? It can be seen that Xia Shishi is really an insightful and capable minister. No wonder His Majesty the Emperor entrusted him with an important task early. Shortly before Li Ju left, the governor of Lingbei Road retired, and Xia Junxiao took off the word day and took the post of governor, becoming the youngest chief since the founding of Dayang. Let's not talk about how many parties are fighting. I have 3 questions to ask your highness the third prince. Is it convenient? The third prince bowed and said, Sir, please enlighten me. First, apart from all the power disputes, do you really want to get rid of the matter of Governor Xia? Of course. This is the most beneficial thing for the people. It not only increases the national treasury revenue, but also encourages people to improve the labor productivity you mentioned, stabilizes agriculture, and is particularly effective in reducing the burden on farmers, and also inhibits land annexation. Sir, I have taught you that the fall of every dynasty in the past is inseparable from the high concentration of land and taxes in the late period. If we maximize the survival of the people and delay the process of land annexation, can't Dayang rest easy? Second, even if your persistence fails and you have to compromise with the university scholars and big businessmen in the end, what will you lose? If the reform fails, then I'm Wang Linchen, right? I'm a prince, and I only need to be responsible to the royal family. Even if the reform fails, my life will not be in danger. Your Majesty is a wise monarch unprecedented in history. You will certainly not sit idly by and watch them increase the burden on the farmers, nor will you reject the method of increasing treasury revenue. So if I give it a try, your Majesty will surely see it, so how can you blame me? Third, if you compromise, will you regret it? I understand. This is what the gentleman said. I will go, even if there are thousands of people against me. Li Ju smiled. The third prince is simple-minded on the outside but smart on the inside. He is smart in his ability to see through things and do things, but he does not have the slightest intention of taking shortcuts. His nature is quite good. He is decisive and courageous, compassionate and kind. It is worthwhile to help him make decisions. I'll invite you to see something good in a few days. Who knows, they'll beg you to implement the new tax law as soon as possible, so they can go out and rob money. The third prince couldn't help but be curious about Li Ju, and just when he was about to ask in detail, the eunuch came to pass on the message. Your Majesty ordered Feng Ranghao and Feng Ranghao's house to see His Majesty. The third prince jumped up and squeezed into the back hall of the main hall with Li Ju to receive guests. Qianlong Hall was originally a place where the emperor summoned and entertained ministers and foreign envoys according to regulations, but when His Majesty was in a good mood, he could summon them anywhere. Today, His Majesty chose Qianlong Hall according to regulations, firstly to give the Queen and Chen Guiyang a legitimate name to attend, and secondly, it was the first time to summon Li Ju, whom he had known for nearly 10 years, so it should be more serious. When the Emperor and the Queen saw Li Ju for the first time, they felt that it was very different from what they had imagined. His Majesty and Li Ju had been exchanging letters for some years. Li Ju's letters are always lackluster, with plain writing style and simple stories. There is no twists and turns, no embellishment, and they directly tell surprising things. For example, what new method was tested this year, and the output of a certain grain increased by a certain amount. What good things were implemented this year, and a certain grain and oil crop in a certain place doubled. This year, what advantageous crops were discovered in a certain place, and were newly developed, and the disposable income of the people increased by a certain amount. Li Ju used a boring writing style to write things similar to the Ministry of Revenue report. In addition, Li Ju was over 30 years old and should look like a middle-aged man whose end can be seen at a glance. Therefore, the emperor imagined that Li Ju was a dull, square and upright template. The queen imagined that Li Ju was a slick and powder-faced man. Li Ju, as shown in Chen Guiyang's letters, was full of crooked talents and could persuade others to do things his way. In just 3 or 5 days, he deceived Chen Guiyang, Sun Mama, and several princes to speak well of him. There were other reports that Li Ju was handsome, and many families in Jiangnan wanted to marry their daughters and sisters to him. So the queen naturally put him in the mold of those prodigal sons in the capital who slept with prostitutes and attracted bees and butterflies. But the Li Ju who appeared in front of the emperor and the queen was a very heroic young man, with clear eyes, thick eyebrows and big eyes. Not only was he not dull and slick, but he was also naturally bright and upright. He was tall and strong, with a very strong body and a straight body. If he was said to be a young general from a military family, he would definitely deceive a large number of people. In the greetings, he showed that he was clear in speech and very responsive. He was indeed honest, and did not like to be roundabout, but he was not as clumsy as the emperor imagined, nor as sweet talking as the queen assumed. The couple liked him very much at first sight, and had a 3-point good impression of him. The queen was even more secretly satisfied. This one looked much better than the one from the Yang family. Chen Guiyang's vision was better than her father's. Looking at the people who came with Li Ju, Wei Jialian was sent by His Majesty the Emperor, so he naturally had a good appearance. The mute was an old man who had followed Li Ju for nearly 10 years. Although he could not speak, he looked good, without any trace of inferiority or meanness. The most important one was Zhao Sanjiu, an official of Li Ju. When she saluted, she followed the rules and did not look up. The emperor and empress were only concerned with greeting Li Ju, so they did not look at her carefully. After the greetings, the eunuchs set up seats and invited them to sit down. Sanjiu followed in, and the emperor and empress noticed the woman who made the third prince insist on marrying her as his wife. As expected, she had a slim figure and an extraordinary face. Her Royal Highness the Queen asked a few questions about the journey and the capital, and Sanjiu responded cautiously and generously. So the Yangao couple could not help but secretly praise her, and instantly forgot 9/10 of their previous slight resignation. Chapter 408, Heartfelt Confidence. Li Ju and others sat down at the table, and the eunuch Feng Nian led people to serve tea and fruit plates. His Majesty the Emperor took a mare's milk mashed potato cake first, and said with a smile, "Today is a private occasion. Boxiu does not need to be restrained. These tea fruits are all varieties of fruits cultivated by your Li garden, and made according to the Beijing standard. They are very different from your Jiangnan. Boxiu can also try it." With the emperor's leading action, the tense atmosphere was instantly relaxed. When Li Ju entertained some more cramped guests at home, he often took the lead in eating and drinking to let the guests calm down first. The eunuch who went to convey the imperial edict may have been mainly following Li Ju during this period. He approached Li Ju and whispered to him how to respond at this time. When the emperor said a sentence, there were often at least 2 ways to interpret it, all depending on the atmosphere, occasion, context and the other party's understanding of the emperor. Li Ju was just a passing line in this regard, so it was necessary to have someone who was familiar with the emperor to assist him. For example, here the emperor said that the ministers should also try it, but it did not necessarily mean to let them try it. The eunuch explained to Li Ju, His Majesty has said that today's relationship is indeed a private one, so there is no need to be bound by formalities. My lord, you can thank him and do as you please. Li Ju thanked the emperor on behalf of Sanjiu, Lao Wei and others. He also saw the queen pointing to a piece of melon seed and peanut crisp and asking the maid to pick a piece. Chen Guiyang lowered his head and held the teacup to stir the tea milk. The third prince tilted his head and recommended this and that to him with great interest and proudly said that which of them was the recipe he copied. Li Ju also cooperated and took the most humble one from the pile of various tea fruits on the gold and silver lacquer strips in front of him, but he did not eat it, just put it in front of him to look at it. His Majesty the Emperor also took only a slight sip, and the topic at this moment was not eating and drinking, but chatting. Boxiu has done a lot of good things over the years, and you should have been summoned to the capital for a talk and reward long ago. Unfortunately, for various reasons, it was delayed until today. When I saw you today, I felt a little regretful that I should have summoned you earlier. This is what it means to meet too late, right? The eunuch did not give any hints and just let him express himself freely. Li Ju found a template in the memorial to the emperor on leaving the capital and replied, I'm a commoner, I till the fields in the south. I live in the mountains and forests, and I make friends with deer. Your Majesty did not look down on me for my humble status, and entrusted me with various affairs in the south of the Yangtze River, so I was able to do everything. Although I have not had the honor of seeing your face, the correspondence between us is enough to show your grace. It's enough to just say these words on the spot. You and I hit it off from the moment we met. How can it be described with set words? I really regret all the things that Baksu has accomplished. The regret is why you were not reborn in our family. If you were reborn in my family, I'm afraid we wouldn't be as prosperous as the three places of Huanan, Huabi and Lingbi. The queen said, that's useless. You still need the ancestors of Marquis Fengrang. I think this is good enough. Besides, even if you were not reborn in our family, it's the same to be a half-son. She said the last sentence very softly, and no one else could hear it, except the emperor and his close servants who were sitting at the same table. Chen Guiyang seemed to sense something and looked up. Her mother was also looking at her with a smile. She hurriedly lowered her head and continued to turn her teacup, as if she could see a flower. His Majesty the Emperor did not think of Chen Guiyang for a moment, but of his other daughters, especially the third princess born to concubine Chen, who had an appendectomy. He was still thinking, could this be fate? If it weren't for the surgery performed by Li Ju, this daughter might have been gone. Thinking about it again, the third girl did learn a lot of miscellaneous knowledge from Li Yuan, and she must have been able to talk to Li Ju. The bad thing is that Li Ju is more than 10 years older than the third princess, but Li Ju looks young, so it seems okay. His Majesty the Emperor thought about letting the third princess meet Li Ju secretly and give them a chance to chat so that it would not be considered a blind marriage, which seemed feasible. After noting this, His Majesty the Emperor then talked about how, since the Chengyang Prefecture experimental field, the number of memorials from the court ministers opposing Li Ju's miscellaneous learning and various strategies has increased, gradually affecting various matters that have already been launched in Hualien and Lingbi. Li Yuan's school, clinic experimental field, and joint venture were all within the scope of export, and even affected the maritime trade in Lingbi Road. When Zhao Junshao was promoted to governor, the court was so angry that it almost broke out, and old Zhao had no solid backing, so he was almost blocked. In the end, it was Zhang Fu's father who came forward to mediate, and cleared the obvious stumbling block in the court. If the conversation continued, it would involve court politics. Logically, the Queen and Chen Guiyang should not be listening here, but His Majesty the Emperor trusted them, mother and daughter, and trusted that he would not be blown away by pillow talk. In addition, Li Ju's matter had been going on for several years, and now everyone knew about it, so there was nothing to hide. In this case, he also privately expressed to Li Ju that he, the Emperor, supported him and let him do it. Li Ju knew that he could save his head, so he didn't care much about other things. He was not after money or fame, but just an ambition and a wish. He hoped that everyone in the world would have food to eat, clothes to wear, and a house to live in. In this way, even if he was squeezed to death by the people in the court, the worst situation would be that his family business would be gone. What's the big world? He has hands and feet, martial arts and knowledge. Where can't he go? As for those family businesses, he didn't believe it. The grain seeds and technology were there. Even if the joint venture and the technical station were flattened by the literati, these good things that could increase output could still be lost. Li Yuan's industry will not disappear. At most, it will change its name and become the industry of the exploiting class. It will still make a lot of money and attract many people to come to work for a living. And those who work on the assembly line and in the factory will sooner or later awaken their will. Li Ju will leave some crucial books. The dragon slaying technique must be left to them. Thinking of this, Li Ju was fearless. His Majesty the Emperor gradually talked about the performance of various parties in the court. I also know what old Wu is thinking. He and old Yang other people who have been squeezed by you. Seeing your family prospering, he feels uneasy. He is looking for trouble for no reason. What's more, your theories have indeed shaken their foundation. You have destroyed their harmony between heaven and man, and created a technical clerk to target the imperial examination. Don't think I can't see that you don't want to create a technical clerk, but a technical bureaucrat in your mind. They submit memorials to cry to the heaven, earth, and the emperor every day, and keep saying Li Ju bastard, and destroy the foundation of the country. Although it is useless, it is really annoying. Speaking of which, it's a good thing that I'm the emperor. If it was someone else, you'd have destroyed the heaven in your mandate from heaven, so wouldn't you have been sent away just like the previous dynasty? Even I don't know how long I can keep this calm. The ancients said 3 people make a tiger, and you're not here, so there are always fewer people to defend you, so can only let them talk. I don't know if I can still trust you over time. It's easier to understand why they target you. You've placed merchants in too high a position, so how can those arrogant scholars not resent you? You also have a naive saying that all beings are equal, regardless of high or low status, which will make them even more unhappy. If people don't have different social classes, can they still act tyrannically? You want to suppress mergers and acquisitions, but they want to merge land to accumulate wealth. You have a fundamental contradiction, and it's no wonder they want to overthrow your new laws. There are also some opinions from the clan members, which are nothing more than competing with the people for profit. They are probably jealous of your prosperous business and the riches of Voldzire. I'm not telling you this, because I hope you can come up with an idea, or ask you to deal with it. You are doing what you want to do, and I have my responsibilities. How can I be abandoned after the rabbit has died? It's just because I don't want to be a good person behind the scenes, and I also hope that you know how hard I work. Chapter 409, The Castrated Version of Dragon Slaying Technique 1. The conversation between His Majesty the Emperor and Li Ju on this occasion was truly a heartfelt talk between an elder and a younger generation. In particular, the Queen's suggestion of half-son hit the nail on the head. Looking at Li Ju again, he was his own son-in-law. As for what Li Ju said about must have a confidant, it was a joke. The Emperor's daughter, the Emperor said she was your confidant. Do you dare to say no? His Majesty the Emperor told Li Ju everything that had happened in the court against the Li family in the past 2 years, including his own thoughts, the root of the problem, the connections between these people, and even the turbulent waves surrounding the succession. His Majesty the Emperor was not unaware, but as he got older, he paid more attention to self-cultivation, and was not happy to worry about it. Anyway, the people below could not cause any big storms. Besides, the children should be pulled out to face this complicated situation. Otherwise, would the throne be passed on to a yellow-mouthed child who knew nothing in the future? After saying all this, His Majesty asked, "What does Boxiu think? I called you here this time to let you defend yourself, so that you won't be treated as a soft specimen by others and everyone wants to take advantage of you. Your Majesty, my thoughts are very simple and direct. No matter what problems, excuses, or contradictions they have, they'll oppose my proposals and strategies. In the final analysis, they all have the same motivation. Benefits. This interest is not only property, wealth, power, and sex, but can also be attributed to distribution, and distribution is part of the system. In my opinion, this system is not the simple laws, morals, and rules that people think of now, but a combination of all the relationships between people. My ancestors named it relationships. His Majesty was keenly aware that what Li Ju said was not simple, and he made a prompt decision to ask someone to fetch pen, ink, paper, and inkstone from the storehouse. In fact, there is not much to write, because the content is highly abstract. A person, as a person, must be in a certain relationship. There are fathers and sons, mothers and sons, brothers and sisters, monarchs and ministers. Even if he is an orphan born and raised by nature, he must live. To live, he must eat, drink, defecate, urinate and sleep. One person cannot solve all problems, and he must have a certain degree of connection with others. This is the relationship. So why there are the moral principles between monarchs and ministers, why there are rents and taxes, why the country has an army, why the county government cannot settle village affairs, all of the above can be attributed to relationships. And this relationship is not something that one person can decide. For example, the moral principles between monarchs and ministers. Tay///Zhu founded the country. Can he just say that he is the king and it will be done? Soldiers, horses, food, grass, and people, which one can be missing? Since the founding of the country, have all the policies implemented come from your heart? Your Majesty did not make compromises? Haven't the policies of the court been distorted when they were implemented locally? The court proposed to ban drowning girls many years ago, but drowning girls is still a trend among the people. This trend is a custom and a kind of relationship. So why is there such a terrible relationship? Is it just because the people are ignorant and think that men are incense and women are spilled water and are not worth raising? Li Ju wrote production relations on a piece of paper and productive forces on another piece of paper. Two eunuchs came over consciously and held up the two pieces of paper in their hands for everyone to see. My ancestors called the thing that determines production relations productivity. Productivity can be simply understood as the amount of things that a certain adult population can create within a certain period of time. All my actions in Yaoniang, including the miscellaneous subjects taught in the school, revolve around productivity. The most typical representatives are the water-powered looms and mule looms. In the past, it was amazing for a skilled female worker to weave a piece of cloth a day, and this piece of cloth was a manifestation of productivity. Now, water-powered looms can weave more than 10 pieces of cloth a day, which shows that productivity has increased. In addition, road construction and tramways have greatly improved traffic capacity, allowing goods and people to move faster, which is also a manifestation of increased productivity. Seeing that everyone understood productivity, Li Ju talked about the connection between the two in reverse. The level of productivity directly determines the population capacity of a place. In this case, it can certainly determine the relationship between people. When the amount of land is higher than the ability of people to cultivate it, of course no one will rent other people's land for cultivation, because he does not need to establish social relations, and can dig out enough land to grow food with his own hands. At this time, if someone has a large amount of land that needs to be cultivated by others, he will resort to buying slaves. At this time, people's needs are shallow, their lifespan is short, and their needs beyond survival are low, which means that a large number of people can be squandered. Therefore, the earlier the time, the more extensive and strict the relationship of slavery is. And now, as early as the founding of the Great Yang State, the slave system has been abolished, and the laws and regulations prohibit masters from beating slaves to death, to maximize the survival of the people. Why? Because the country needs people. Why does the country need people? Because productivity has increased. What each person can produce has increased. The scope of the country's rule has become larger. People's desires have become more colorful. The moral level has become higher. And the laws have become more strict and detailed. Your Majesty, please recall what the laws were like in the Zhao royal era. And what are the laws like now? How is the emperor's food and clothing recorded in the Analects and Mencius? And how is the emperor's food and clothing in modern times? Gradually infer. What about the common people? His Majesty the Emperor, Yaoniang and the third prince present all understood. Although Li Ju highly summarized and simplified some of the content, they could understand it more or less. Yaoniang and the third prince were fine, but His Majesty felt a chill on his back for some reason. Li Ju had already passed productivity at the speed of light and wrote 2 lines of ownership and distribution system on a piece of paper. In fact, there is also a relationship between people, but Li Ju didn't want to discuss that today. The surface manifestation of production relations is these 2 things, as well as the relationship between individuals, which is not the main point today. Because what I'm shaking now is the distribution system, and what will eventually be shaken is the ownership system. The distribution system you mentioned refers to how the world's wealth and fame are distributed to everyone. You have indeed shaken their foundation. The peasants under your rule have low taxes and high labor costs, so people will naturally focus on you. You also have your own set of theories, and with my permission, you have an independent system for appointing officials. Whether it is wealth or power, you are competing with them. No wonder. Your Majesty, it's not just that. The distribution system is not just about taxes and power. The state does not just adjust the direction of wealth through taxes. There is also a hidden condition here, which is how much of the gains after labor will belong to him. As the saying goes, the soil in front of the door is used up, and there is no tile on the roof. 10 fingers are not stained with mud, and they live in a building. Annexing land, hiring people to farm, collecting rent and tribute. This is the most basic idea of agricultural wealth accumulation. What I finally shook was this system. I took people away from the land and sent them to the factory. The income of workers comes from the salary distributed according to their work, and they're no longer serving the landlords. Labor is more valuable, and fewer people are farming. In order to stabilize the cultivated area of grain, the court has to directly enact laws, but it still can't stop people from secretly crossing the line. In order to recruit enough people to farm, the landlords must lower the rent of the land, or privately raise illegal slaves. Your Majesty, a new system was born around the factory. The reason why the groups attached to the land attacked me is not only because I challenged their authority, but also because they have unknowingly discovered that the factory, the big killer I released, is the first butcher's knife hanging over their heads. Chapter 410, The Castrated Version of Dragon Slaying Technique 2. His Majesty the Emperor, the third prince and the others were not stupid people. After Li Ju explained his thoughts, they followed his logic and understood almost everything. At least they understood almost everything that Li Ju had intended to explain. After they understood this most fundamental reason, Li Ju returned to the issues of scholarship cliques, taxes, factions and party struggles. In my understanding, all of the above are contradictions between production relations that are dependent on land and production relations that are dependent on factories, machinery, and workers. The academic cliques want to monopolize the authority of the imperial examinations and become officials. If they want to jump out of their own class and enter the bureaucratic system, they must reach an agreement with a group of academic cliques and use each other to achieve the effect of one call and 100 responses. From this perspective, factions and party struggles are the same. Taxes are even more deadly. Your Majesty, if a group has the ability to formulate taxes, it will definitely protect the interests of its own group and make taxes more beneficial to itself. Your Majesty, think carefully. Why every dynasty has the same situation when it perishes? The treasury is empty and unable to support the army. The court's elite troops that look good on paper are filled with a large number of empty salaries and blood-sucking military expenses and food. The large number of people are extremely poor. The people are in poverty, hungry, poorly clothed, and unable to make a living. So, where is the money? Where did the money go? Dayang has more than 400 million mu of arable land. Excluding barren mountains, there are no less than 900 million mu of semi-agricultural land such as forests and grass. The annual output of grain converted into refined rice must be more than 80 million dan, and there are countless outputs of cloth, firewood, and charcoal. However, the people of the world are hungry and cold, and their daily rations are less than half a kati. The population of Dayang is just 60 million. At the peak of the previous dynasty, it was only about 10 million, and the annual food rations did not exceed 1 million dan. Where did the surplus food go every year? Your Majesty, after Dayang was founded, the treasury was full, and the meritorious officials who followed Tezu to travel the world were awarded with huge wealth. The account book of the founding Duke of Song showed that his family had 2,000 slaves. Where did all this money, grain, land, and people come from? His Majesty the Emperor had a gloomy face. It was confiscated from the local treasurers and wealthy families that were conquered. The previous dynasty couldn't even organize a decent resistance. The national treasury couldn't even provide one armor for each member of the imperial guards, and the baggage couldn't be fully transported by carriages and horses. Countless people starved to death, without a grain of rice in their pots or an inch of land in their homes, and were forced to rise up in rebellion. The royal family of the previous dynasty has become an empty shell, and the people of the previous dynasty are so poor that they are just skin and bones. The money is all in the homes of the prominent families, nobles, landlords, and wealthy businessmen. Thinking of this, everything became clear. The royal family of the previous dynasty had nothing in the treasury. When it came to disaster relief, comforting the people, and raising the army, the treasury was out of money. In fact, from the emperor, empress to princes and dukes, everyone was extremely wealthy. A month before the Green Forest Army entered Chang'an City, Prince Lo and Prime Minister Zhang Kun competed in wealth, using gold, silver, and jade as decorations, to decorate Chang'an City like a pile of gold and jade. It's not that they had no money, it's that the money was piled up, and rotted in their warehouses. When ///Zhu entered Chang'an, the Green Forest Army had not yet emptied Prince Peng's private treasury. The people's blood and sweat. The people's blood and sweat. They concentrated the world's wealth in the hands of a few people through what you call distribution. The people are extremely poor, but their exploitation has become more severe. The whole world is poor, but they are the only one who is rich. How can they not destroy the country? Your Majesty, what you said is very true. This is exactly what I mean. Once they get the power to formulate taxation and other distribution strategies, they will inevitably deepen their grabbing of the world's wealth from generation to generation. Even if the country is destroyed, their families will not be destroyed and will still be prosperous and wealthy. Then, who is the emperor and who is the country? What does it matter? May I ask your Majesty, among the wealthy families of this world, in addition to the royal family and the meritorious officials who followed the emperor, are there any people of humble origin? Are they still the wealthy people of the previous dynasty, who suddenly transformed themselves and became the new nobles of this dynasty? His Majesty thought carefully about the families, who are now above the 4th rank, and above the 3rd rank, and remained silent. Only Li Ju and 3 or 5 founding families are truly grassroots. Li Ju has the accumulation of his ancestors, and the ancestors of the other families are all born with natural talents, which can be said to be the talents that only stars can have, so they can get a share of the rewards. Until now, except for Li Ju, other wealthy and powerful families from grassroots backgrounds have been integrated into the small circle and class of the generations of wealthy families through marriages for 2 or 3 generations. Even for a single person like Li Ju, isn't he considering giving him a princess wife? And their Liu family, if you trace back carefully, is also a wealthy family in Jinling for hundreds of years. Otherwise where would they get food, grass, and soldiers after the uprising? The taxes of the court were controlled by him, and there was no problem for a while. But he was not completely unaware of the local extortion. He also knew clearly whose children were selected for the imperial examinations held every 3 years, whether there were any real poor children, and what proportion of the poor people were. After thinking about this, His Majesty the Emperor had a little sweat on his forehead. It's still early now, and it's not time to get to this point. Besides, isn't Li Ju already working to reverse this trend? I set up joint camps everywhere to improve productivity, create more wealth, and force the production relations to transform in a direction that is more beneficial to the people. I increased the rights of the court and workers in the joint camps to resist the interests of the scholar official class. Because the court revolves around your Majesty's will, as long as the emperor is clear-headed at the time, he must know the truth, that the king is the boat and the people are the water, and will not oppress the people to the point where they cannot survive and are forced to revolt. At the same time, the court has organizational capabilities, military resources, an innate moral stance, and authority. 1 point of weight can be used as 10 points, which is naturally a good weapon. So I gave it to the court with self-control, has a high voice. If the emperor is not stupid, he can naturally control the industries of various businesses through the joint venture, so as to prevent the scholars, wealthy families, and wealthy merchants from putting the emperor and the country in danger, by ignoring the life and death of the country and only caring about their own wealth. I give workers rights, because workers represent the most advanced productivity. Workers deal with machines every day, and know the shortcomings of the machines and the direction of improvement, so they have the ability to control the future direction of the joint venture. As long as they can still fight for their own interests, they will not take the path of uprising and overthrowing the court. Your Majesty, think about it carefully. Is my analysis correct? His Majesty the Emperor could not think of any loopholes, and nodded in agreement. Sir, what you said makes sense. It is indeed so. The joint venture association is a good thing. I need it. I sincerely hope that the technical station can be promoted, because its technical bureaucracy system is fundamentally for the purpose of improving productivity, and it has been closely tied to agriculture, farmers, industry, and workers since its birth. It competes with traditional academic cliques for talents, and it must be the chisel to break the power monopoly of that small circle, and the weapon for the new production relations, to fight against the existing production relations. Your Majesty, think again. Is my arrangement appropriate? His Majesty the Emperor continued to nod. Very appropriate. It was me who didn't think so deeply at the time. You are absolutely right. I once followed my grandfather and father to conquer the world. When the queen was young, she lived among the people. We also knew some of the sufferings of the people. When it came to Sanlang's generation, he rarely left the palace before he came of age, let alone leaving Beijing. It has only been in the past 3 years that he has understood the people's sentiments. The children in Beijing have gradually developed some arrogant and domineering habits. This is very bad. I need to find a way to leave a connection with the people for future generations. I must not let the stupid things of freezing and starving to death in the people and praising the snow in the court happen. Li Ju heard this and felt a little happy. It was worth it for him to dismantle and modify the random compilation of GBO and finally put the joint venture and the technical station on the right track. As long as His Majesty the Emperor cannot see through his logic, those simple worker seedlings will surely thrive under the care of His Majesty the Emperor and grow into worker grandfathers. Chapter 411, The Little Matter of Banzi. The third prince had just whispered with Li Ju about the Ministry of Revenue, and it seemed that he could understand more clearly when he turned around and listened to the productivity, production relations, and distribution system. Li Ju had been targeted by Wu Yu and his supporters for more than 1 or 2 years, and it involved more than 1 or 2 things. There were many doubts and oppositions, and after unraveling them, there was only one root cause. From the perspective of dynasty change, the royal family was naturally on the same side as Li Ju. Li Ju wanted the common people to live well, and the royal family wanted the world to be stable and peaceful, so naturally they formed an alliance. It should be noted that the current aristocratic families are indeed the family foundation accumulated over many years. Although they have experienced changes in dynasties, they have only slightly damaged some branches and leaves. But the royal bloodline of each dynasty is almost dead. His Majesty the Emperor must think more about his descendants no matter what. The heavy topic lasted for more than 3 hours. The Emperor and Li Ju were so engrossed in the conversation that they didn't realize it was getting late. The other people sitting with them ate up all the snacks without noticing. The eunuch added 2 more servings to prevent the masters from going hungry. When the Emperor thought through the matter, it was already very late. Li Ju and Sanjiu could no longer leave the palace. The third prince and Shengyang didn't dare to say anything, but the queen showed a resentful expression when the Emperor looked at her. His Majesty the Emperor could only laugh. 1,000 cups of wine are not enough when you are with a bosom friend. Time flies so fast. Discussing politics with Bo Xiu is like having divine help. It is a good year. What time is it? Your Majesty, it is past 15:30. His Majesty the Emperor shook his head. It is already this time. Mr. Li, I'm sorry. Let's stay in the warm room of the council hall today. Will you and others also stay there when they discuss politics late at night? There are also scholars on duty next door, so it is not an exception. Naturally, everything in the palace was decided by His Majesty the Emperor, and Li Ju had nothing to say. The small kitchen, which had been waiting for a day, was busy presenting the newly made dishes. There were a total of 98 dishes, including hot and cold meat, vegetables, soups and sweets, and seafood and land delicacies. There were even 9 kinds of pickles as side dishes, including crab, salted fish, meat, vinegar, fruit and other flavors. His Majesty knew Li Ju's character, so he explained, I know that Mr. Li doesn't care about eating, drinking and having fun. Today is our first meeting, so I specially made it grand. Your Majesty, I'm ashamed to accept your grace. Li Ju also knew that the Emperor would never be like him, living a simple life, and of course he would not criticize him like a fool for being too extravagant. His Majesty had no intention of promoting wealth and luxury, and Li Ju had no intention of persuading and mocking him, so the two sides were very harmonious. His Majesty recognized that Li Ju was a good person, and he also liked Zhao Sanjiu's face, so he liked this girl. Not polite. That's natural and free. Rough manners? That's naive and straightforward. Lack of fear and admiration? That's her neither humble nor arrogant. She was good in every aspect, but his third son blushed when he glanced at the girl from such a distance, and was not as generous as the girl. His Majesty secretly despised her in his heart, but also felt that his son had finally come to his senses. Thinking of this, he looked at his eldest daughter again. Chen Guiyang was much more cunning and suppressed herself well, so her father didn't notice any problems. His Majesty the Emperor felt that his daughter was indeed the eldest princess of his and the queen's bloodline, dignified, generous, steady. But he didn't know that Chen Guiyang had long learned how to hide her emotions. If the queen hadn't been really careful and had other information channels, I'm afraid the queen would have been deceived by her. The atmosphere at the dinner table was very peaceful and the conversation was comfortable. His Majesty the Emperor specially ordered the eunuchs to prepare a smaller flower hall for the banquet, and there were no separate seats for individual seats, but a group dining system. After each dish was served, the eunuchs distributed it to everyone, so that there would be no interference, and it would be convenient for conversation. The atmosphere of the conversation directly determines how much the conversation can be said. If it was still like the afternoon summons, each sitting at a table, a few feet apart, opening the mouth I heard the minister's reply, and closing the mouth thank you for your grace, and accept the order, some words would not be able to be said. There has to be this kind of intimate atmosphere of passing wine across seats, to warm up the spring, so that some things can be said. Xiu is 30 years old, right? Your Majesty, I turned 30 last year. Oh, what about your sister? Because Li Ju always called Sanjiu and Yaoniang sisters, His Majesty also called them that. Sanjiu will be 30 next year. Ah. She is 8 years older than my son. His Majesty hesitated. Although Sanjiu does not look old, her age is there after all. His Majesty looked at the third prince again, and his face was still red. He knows how to choose people. Women of different ages have different styles. 16 or 17 years old are green willow buds and poplar buds. 24 or 25 are scorching peaches, plums, apricots and tangerines. And 30-something years old are ripe peaches dripping with sweetness. From a distance, they look like a bag of honey, but they are soft and tough to the touch. The taste is beyond the imagination of outsiders. The third prince really knows how to choose people. His Majesty the Emperor signaled the Empress and Chen Guiyang to have a casual chat with Sanjiu. He was satisfied with what she said and what she did, but he didn't know if concubine Shu was satisfied. Thinking that concubine Shu might have some resistance, His Majesty the Emperor couldn't help but turn his attention back to Li Ju. Sanjiu was born in a poor family. Looking at the Yu family alone, she was really a burden to the third prince. But we should look at things 2 steps further. If we count Li Ju, her brother, Sanjiu's family background can't be bad, at least not worse than Miss Shen. Miss Shen was originally a high-end candidate for the imperial concubine, but was dragged down by her parents' separation and her father's dislike. Sanjiu was a low-end candidate and was brought up by Li Ju, but they were not biological siblings, so this kind of bringing up had to be discounted. His Majesty thought if he recruited Li Ju as his son-in-law, on the one hand, he said that he would never have 2 colors, so his daughter's happiness would not be a worry, and he would not be afraid that Li Ju would have another Shanji. The son-in-law would also be granted a title of Marquis, and Li Ju would enjoy 2 Marquesses, hold real power, and be able to walk sideways in the capital, which was not much worse than the superclass duke. There was another idea. Li Ju was a man who valued friendship, with a layer of filial piety and a layer of husband-wife friendship. Even if Li Ju became wild, and changed his mind, and wanted to rebel, he would hesitate again and again, or even not be able to rebel at all. In this way, Li Ju got 2 Marquesses, enjoyed superclass treatment, and his sister became a princess consort, which was enough. In fact, there was a hidden worry in this plan that His Majesty could not say. His Majesty saw that his sons were stupid, and they were a million miles away from Li Ju's sharpness and thoroughness. If, 100 years later, Li Ju no longer wants to play along with the Yang, Wu, Zheng and other families, and wants to change the world and become a Sima, I'm afraid that the current children are no match for Li Ju. However, if Li Ju marries the princess, even if Li Ju succeeds in the rebellion in the future, won't he still have to pass on the throne to the bloodline of the Liu family? His Majesty the Emperor secretly learned some genetics and knew that daughters can also pass on bloodlines. The princess's children are also children of his Liu family. Maybe the bloodline passed on by daughters is more stable. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 412 Duck. That night, Li Ju stayed in the council hall with Sanjiu and the other 4 people. However, just as Sanjiu was taken away and settled, Princess Chengyang's maid Ziking came and called Sanjiu to the pepper room. Sanjiu couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although she was struggling in the career field like men, she didn't want to live so close to a group of men, especially the strange scholars next door. In particular, the lecturers who stayed on duty in the next few rooms were all very disgusted with Li Ju and the other 4. Sanjiu was also angry when she saw it. She didn't have the calm temperament like Li Ju. Fortunately, Chengyang came. Chengyang took Sanjiu away. Half of the reason was indeed because it was not convenient for her to live so close to Li Ju at night, and the other half was of course the queen and consort Yu's intention. With the identity of the 3rd prince's consort, she will definitely be named a princess in the future, so a hasty meeting at a dinner party is not enough. The queen and consort Yu wanted to let this girl live under the queen in the Pepper Palace for a few days like other concubines, to observe her character and temperament. Sanjiu also realized that something was wrong at this time, but she could only take one step at a time. The worst case scenario was that she would be detained as a hostage, to threaten her master, to hand over some secrets or treasures, but Sanjiu didn't care about that. She trusted Chengyang's character, so she followed him openly. When she was in Jinling, Sanjiu also stayed with Princess Chengyang. Today, the procedures were just more complicated, and there were more rules. Sanjiu was neither nervous nor suspicious. She washed when she was asked to wash, changed clothes when she was asked to change clothes, and slept wherever she was asked to sleep. When it was the next morning, she got up when she was asked to get up, ate when she was asked to eat, and greeted when she was asked to greet. She really did not speak when it is not related to me, and shake her head when asked, and don't know. The news spread quickly in the palace. The queen can keep a secret when she wants to, but Sanjiu is such a big person and has an identity. She stayed in the palace overnight with Chengyang, and the queen didn't think about hiding it well. After all, she had to take her to see concubine Shu often, and the news spread quickly. So soon after getting up in the morning, the palaces and the candidates followed to see what kind of lady this girl who cut in halfway was. Among them, Miss Shen was the most anxious. Miss Shen was very shrewd, and she did things without any leaks. Her appearance, talent, means and mind were all first class, so Miss Shen's vision has always been high. This time she was aiming for the position of the prince's consort. The 4th prince decided on Miss Lin, leaving Miss Shen with only the 2nd and 3rd princes. Judging from the situation of the 2 princes, Miss Shen prefers the 3rd prince, because he is a simple man and easy to control. The 2nd prince is more scheming than her, and he is more beautiful than her, which makes Miss Shen have something to say. Everything was going well. Her scheming and methods were just right, which allowed her to live peacefully without causing the queen's disgust. It was not until the 3rd prince returned to the court that he clearly proposed a candidate for the prince's consort that he liked. At that time, communication was not well developed. Miss Shen tried her best to find out about Mrs. Zhao, but she could only know that she was a widow, an official of Feng Ranghao, very beautiful, not very serious, and hung out with men all day. This was also the news that most people could find out. So in their imagination, Zhao Sanjiu should be a charming woman in her middle age with a lingering charm. However, reality made them silent. Sanjiu was not only not a charming woman who was good at playing with women, but also had a kind of uprightness that was exactly the same as Chengyang. She and Chengyang were both married women, and even the style of their eyebrows and eyes was somewhat similar. However, Sanjiu's beauty was real. Although she was wearing a few old clothes of Chengyang that had never been worn and did not fit her style very well, she was still amazing. Miss Shen followed the crowd and listened to another round of mutual sarcasm. Sanjiu was not talkative, but what she said was always sharp and hit the mark. Miss Shen felt a little sour in her heart. No wonder the third prince couldn't let go after seeing her. Could it be that she could only fight for the second prince and compete with him for the rest of her life? She didn't have the confidence. Moreover, if Sanjiu really married into the third prince's family, Marquis Fengrang would definitely be from the third prince's faction. What would they use to compete with the third prince for the throne? People in Beijing were still nagging about what kind of miscellaneous knowledge the technical station set up by Li Ju was. She knew Li Ju's strengths better than those old scholars in Beijing when she was outside. His strengths in the academic field were only limited. Li Ju's ability to make money and his prestige among the people were the real killers. Among the concubines and the harem, concubine Shu was the first to report. No one told Sanjiu that the mother of the third prince was this concubine Shu. Sanjiu hadn't realized that this was actually the third prince's mother looking for her future daughter-in-law. She did whatever the queen said. She seemed to follow the rules perfectly, and she was open and clear. She didn't flatter or have the arrogance to think that she could rise to the top just because she had taken control of the third prince. Concubine Shu and Sanjiu chatted about where did the girl come from? How was the scenery on the road? What about human relationships? How did the girl meet our eldest princess? She just listened to the depth of Sanjiu's words, and she really couldn't find any fault with it, so concubine Shu felt satisfied. Other concubines and concubines would not find fault with it either. Didn't you see that Chen Guiyang and her were as close as a person? Didn't you know that Princess Chen Guiyang was walking sideways here? Except for one person, concubine Chen, who came late at last. Princess Chen's lifeblood, the third princess, almost died a few years ago because of an acute intestinal abscess. In the end, the imperial physician taught by Li Yuan performed an operation to cut off a section of her intestines to save her life. Normally, most people should be grateful for such medical skills, but concubine Chen refused to do so. Concubine Chen felt that Li Ju and her fate were incompatible. A few years ago, she had set a trap for Li Ju because she had received benefits from the spurs, but she failed to trap Li Ju and instead attracted a rage from His Majesty the Emperor. Now the third princess has a long scar on her stomach, and her body has been examined by the imperial physician. As a mother, she can't even raise her head. Concubine Chen unilaterally announced that she had fallen out with Li Ju. When she looked at Li Ju again, it was like looking at a vixen, and she was not pleasing to the eye in every way. Moreover, Sanjiu was so beautiful and was summoned to the palace by His Majesty the Emperor as an exception, and was left by the Empress to accompany her. No matter how you looked at it, this was a very dangerous signal. By the way, Sanjiu was a widow like concubine Shu. Concubine Shu was also a widow. She entered the palace later than concubine Chen, but was more favored than concubine Chen. Her family background was richer than concubine Chen, and she gave birth to 2 sons. Concubine Chen unilaterally announced that concubine Shu was her mortal enemy. Does this vixen want to follow the path of concubine Shu? When concubine Chen came to pay her respects, she saw the queen, concubine Shu, Chen Guiyang and Lady Zhao talking and laughing. She could hardly hold back her smile. She barely said hello and just started a conversation. She couldn't help but mock Sanjiu. I heard that you have been with Li Ju for 8 years. Is there really nothing special about a man and a woman being together for 8 years? I seem to have heard that there was a Lu in the Qin dynasty. Concubine Shu couldn't help rolling her eyes. The queen, who was always good-tempered, changed the subject without hesitation. Speaking of this Marquis Fengrang, he is really weird. Your Majesty even wants to find a matchmaker for him, but I don't even know how to start this conversation. Chapter 413, Li Ju's daily life of being blocked at the door. The queen did not like fighting with the concubines. She always punished those who started the fight in the harem with 50 lashes each, and the instigator with double the lashes. When she heard that concubine Chen's words were not right, she immediately changed the subject. Seeing that Sanjiu was not only her daughter-in-law, but also half a family member, concubine Shu naturally would not sit idly by and watch concubine Chen humiliate her like this. So she followed the queen's meaning and said, Your Majesty wants to find a matchmaker for Marquis Fengrang? Which girl? Your Majesty regards Marquis Fengrang as your own brother or nephew. Do you want to match him with the families that your Majesty values? The Queen was also very mischievous. She looked at Miss Shen and then at Miss Luo, which made their hearts skip a beat. She smiled and didn't say who it was. Anyway, she's a good one, and your Majesty can't bear to let her go. But isn't it because you like her talent and good character that you want to marry the lady you value to Marquis Fengrang? I think it's a good thing. The Marquis's wife is at least the third rank Marquis's wife. Who knows if she will be conferred the title of Duke next year. Duke is at least the first rank, or maybe a super rank. It sounds good, but Miss Shen is very proud. How could she care about an empty title? What she wants is real power. With the real power, is she still afraid that Li Ju will not cooperate with her? Besides, that Feng Ranghao is more than 10 years older than her. Concubine Shu only thought that His Majesty still maintained the plan to marry Miss Shen to Li Ju, and also took a look at Miss Shen, and then asked Yu Yaoniang, Princess, I heard that many of the new things that Feng Ranghao made were first provided to the wealthy families in Jinling. Did the princess get those when she was in Jinling to pay homage? Seeing that she did not ask Sanjiu, but asked herself, Yu Yaoniang also understood that this was deliberately downplaying the relationship between Li Ju and Sanjiu. She did not know the queen's plan. Just now, she saw that the queen and concubine Shu deliberately glanced at Miss Shen, and only thought that His Majesty was still hesitating between Miss Shen and others. She could only reluctantly reply, I got them all. Feng Ranghao does not like to keep private things, nor does he covet wealth and power. He gives all the good things to others, but he does not get anything. His household items are very simple. No, he is still a spendthrift, and has no control. Miss Shen secretly complained after hearing this. The queen laughed and said, no wonder your father wanted to choose a good wife who can manage the household for him. Speaking of which, your father gave him 2 palace maids as a reward that year, but he didn't want them, otherwise he would have had them. Yu Yaoniang replied, Marquis Fengrang is devoted and devoted, maybe he only gives this love to his wife. As for other women, they are not worth his extra glance. Concubine Shen had just been embarrassed and felt bored, but she couldn't help but interrupt when she heard this. He didn't even look at this official Zhao. Yu Yaoniang looked at Sanjiu, asking her whether she should fight back herself or let her fight back. Sanjiu certainly wanted to fight back herself, but the occasion was serious. The other party was a high-ranking concubine, and she was just an official of the Marquis mansion, so she couldn't talk nonsense. The queen took in all the flirting between the two, and said with a smile, Madam Zhao, just say whatever you want to say. In my heart, you and Yu Yaoniang, that heartless little guy, are the same. And aren't you the only one who can respond to what concubine Chen said? Sanjiu responded, and said calmly, as if she was chatting casually, Marquis Fengrang has a big heart and a big vision. He never pays attention to those trivial things, rumors, speculations, hearsay. We don't know whether Marquis Fengrang looks at anyone, and no one cares. Concubine Shu smiled when she heard it, and thought it would be appropriate for Sanjiu to come to the palace every day to accompany her and talk to concubine Chen. This girl is bold and has good ideas. It took concubine Chen a while to realize that Sanjiu was insinuating that she was making wild guesses about trivial matters, but the queen had already brought the topic to the latest news in Jinling, intending to show off the good things Yu Yaoniang had given her in the past 2 years. If she got angry again, she would look stupid and dull, so she had to hold back her anger and hope to seek revenge in the future. Sanjiu was left in the palace for a few days, and except for concubine Chen, she got along well with everyone else. Those who knew about the third prince's affairs knew that she would most likely become the third prince's consort, and with the queen, concubine Shu, and Yu Yaoniang, the top female relatives, protecting her, they naturally did not dare to provoke her. Those who did not know about the third prince's affairs thought that His Majesty the Emperor had taken a fancy to her. It was not new that His Majesty the Emperor liked widows, so they dared not to make things difficult for her. His Majesty the Emperor had not conferred a title on a new person for many years, and there had been no babies crying in the palace for 10 years. How much did His Majesty like her to make an exception? Who is not afraid of pillow talk? especially when it comes to such a pretty, clever, and brave one. Even Miss Shen, knowing that her main competitor is Sanjiu, is extremely cautious with Sanjiu in public and in private. If she cannot compete for the title of the principal wife, then the prince still has several concubines. If she has to make a living under Sanjiu in the future, she is not as pretty as Sanjiu, nor does she have Sanjiu's affection, nor is she smarter than Sanjiu, nor is she richer than Sanjiu. Behind Sanjiu, there is Marquis Feng Rang. Miss Shen thinks Marquis Feng Rang is not a good husband, but she is envious of Marquis Feng Rang's property. She is blessed in this respect. Therefore, she cannot compare with Sanjiu in every aspect, except her birth and age. Why bother to make enemies early? It is better to ask for favors first. Therefore, Sanjiu's life is quite good. But Li Ju's life outside the palace is much worse. Even though he had been prepared for a long time, the violent storms in the capital were not easy. Wu Yu, Zheng Shidao, Qin Zuzi, and other senior leaders of his generation were willing to come out of retirement, and even their direct disciples did not come out. They only relied on the scholars who were studying in the capital, blocking the main door and side door of Li Ju's house, and angrily denounced Li Ju for his disrespect for the world, his relatives and teachers, etc. Li Ju wanted to reason at first, but when he opened the door, he was almost hit by an egg, so he stopped reasoning. He moved a rocking chair to sit in the garden, instructing the mute to copy books while talking to the outside. They rebuked Li Ju for disturbing the social order and rebelling against the right path. Li Ju lazily replied, "You have your social order and I have mine. Why don't you go and tell the Buddha and the Taoists that their belief in Tathagata and the true man is wrong?" They said that Li Ju disobeyed the will of heaven and disobeyed his father and monarch to shake the prestige of the emperor. Li Ju replied, "The prestige of the emperor lies in the peace and prosperity of the world and the people, not in the illusory will of heaven. Thunder in the sky is because the clouds carry electric charges. Rain in the sky is because the water droplets in the clouds encounter condensation nuclei. The sun and the moon wax and wane because the sun, the moon and the earth are all spheres, and the abnormal celestial phenomena are because the normal state is once every hundreds or thousands of years. You will not live to the age when you can take the celestial phenomena for granted." This is what Zhuangzi said, that summer insects cannot talk about ice, while frogs cannot talk about the sea, and Confucius said that grasshoppers do not know winter. Tut tut. There was silence outside for a moment, and then more intense scolding. Li Ju, an uneducated man, actually called them summer insects and well frogs. They would not think that the electric charge in condensation nuclei that they did not understand was some high-end knowledge. They would only think that Li Ju was talking nonsense. This is how scholars of this era act. Li Ju thought, let him do whatever he wants. It's better to scold him here than to go to the Ministry of Revenue to scold the third prince. The tax reforms of Zizishi and the third prince are really difficult step by step. If they are not done well, the government will be ruined, and people will die. But Li Ju can't help much. His political fighting skills are infinitely low. It's good enough that he doesn't drag his feet. Why help? It's just that all reforms are inseparable from spending money. This kind of reform that involves the people of the world and touches the interests of a class requires even more money. Stabilizing prices, settling disputes, and calming people's hearts. There is no place that doesn't need money and people. Li Ju still has a say in this regard. The joint venture is there, and the drawings and structures of mule machines, water-powered looms, and bicycles have not been disassembled yet. That is to say, textile factories and bicycle factories everywhere are still relying on his Qingshan Jinling industry to transport machines and skilled workers, and steam engines are already on the way to being installed and used. This is Li Ju's confidence. Chapter 414, Dignified Guests. In a blink of an eye, Sanjiu had lived in the palace for half a month, and even if she was slow-witted, she could see the problem. So around the Dragon Boat Festival, Sanjiu found ways to get out of the palace and go back to Li Ju's temporary residence to discuss the matter with Li Ju. She still had to go back to the palace at night, using the excuse that Chen Guiyang went to the princess's mansion to settle some things so that they could come out together. "Master, I think something is wrong." I'm in the palace, and the queen arranged for me to stay in the palace in the name of accompanying Princess Yaoniang. But they don't treat me like a companion to the princess, but like a beauty participating in the election. Master, can you find out some information about it? Li Ju felt a headache after hearing this. Moreover, the queen detained Sanjiu and would not let her leave the palace. No matter how much Li Ju trusted Sanjiu's ability, he couldn't help but worry about it. That was the palace of the feudal dynasty. Although the emperor and queen were kind and benevolent, and the concubines and princes did a good job on the surface, if they really wanted to do something, the common people would have no choice but to lie down. Li Ju pondered over and over again, and asked, have you discussed this matter with Her Royal Highness the Princess? Sanjiu replied, of course, I will tell the master about my affairs first. Only when the master knows and says that I can tell others can I tell others. The princess is a good person, but she is still an outsider. Li Ju had no idea of the truth behind this. He didn't even know that the third prince asked for Sanjiu's hand in marriage after returning to the palace, let alone that the emperor and empress were looking for a daughter-in-law. From his modern point of view, he thought that the selection of concubines was for the emperor to choose concubines, and he had no idea that the selection of concubines could also choose companions, relatives, and wives of important officials. When Sanjiu said that she felt that the arrangement of her by the palace people seemed to be arranging for a concubine, Li Ju's first reaction was that it was something about His Majesty the Emperor. But His Majesty the Emperor had been cherishing his blessings and taking care of his health early, and there had been no new people in the harem for many years. No matter how beautiful Sanjiu was, it was impossible for His Majesty the Emperor to break this exception. I think we can only ask the princess directly about this. It just so happens that the princess is out now, right? It's convenient to talk. Let's pack up and go and ask for an audience. Sanjiu didn't think of any other ideas, so she responded softly. The two of them packed up a little, mainly because Li Ju had to change into clothes for meeting guests and comb his hair, and put on a hair crown, then take a few people with him, and then quietly leave through the back door. The front door was still blocked by those scholars. But before they got on the horse, a sedan chair with a red gauze curtain floated over first, accompanied by several beautiful maids, another woman, and 20 or 30 guards in black armor. Li Ju subconsciously thought that this was the group of people that Princess Yaoniang was traveling privately. The sedan chair stopped at the back door of his house. The maid opened the curtain, and the woman helped down a little woman wearing a pearl-studded phoenix hairpin and a flower-scattered gauze skirt with emerald jade beads. Who else could it be but Yaoniang? Sanjiu went to greet him hurriedly. Why are you here, Your Highness? Yaoniang smiled implicitly. You haven't been out and about since you came to the capital. I was worried that you couldn't find me, so I came to find you. Now that you have done your business, let's go back together directly. Wouldn't it be more smooth? Sanjiu glanced at Li Ju, who was calm and composed, and replied, Your Highness is right. Your Highness, I just want to ask you something. I was too embarrassed to ask in the palace, so I came out to ask the master for advice. The master said that you left such a big treasure alone, but came out to ask him who is completely in the dark. Well, you fool, you are looking for fish in a tree. The master was just about to take me to ask for an audience with you, and you happened to be here. So, let's talk inside. So you are looking for me? You didn't see me and made up an excuse? Yaoniang continued to smile implicitly, looking at Li Ju and then at Sanjiu, pointing to the door. Let's go in and talk. My lord, it's really lively here. You just let them chatter outside and do nothing. Li Ju pulled off Zhang Jingwen, who was holding his chin, and fanned himself in his hand, saying with a smile, Princess, I'm going to say something disrespectful. Even if your majesty comes, he may not be able to deal with them. They can't be beaten or scolded. If I say something too harsh, they will carry the statue of Confucius to punish me tomorrow. However, these people outside are big-eyed and bitter-hearted. If they quarrel, they can overturn people's ancestral graves. If you let them really do something, they won't be able to accomplish it in 10 years. Let them quarrel, it won't matter, because there is a curfew at night. During the day, I will treat them as actors in a big show, so I don't have to be bored. Chen Guiyang smiled and said, my lord is also first class at making fun of people. Find joy in suffering. Find joy in suffering. The three of them came to the main living room of Li Ju's residence as they talked. When Yu Yaoniang heard the message outside, she brought tea early and also added some snacks bought outside. She served them around first and then took a few other temporary workers to deliver some to the entourage who came from Chen Guiyang. She took care of everything. When Chen Guiyang heard that the people he brought with him had been settled, he remembered that Li Ju had mentioned before that if Sanjiu quit, the next official would want to promote Yu Yaoniang. So he said meaningfully, Yu Yaoniang is getting better and better at doing things. She is amazing. Ziking and the others are almost outdone. Yu Yaoniang hurriedly hung her hands and replied, I just follow my sisters to learn some ups and downs. I dare not compete with them. Chen Guiyang picked out a piece of kidney bean cake and handed it to her. Just accept my praise. There is no need to be so cautious. After mentioning Yu Yaoniang, Chen Guiyang asked with a smile, what do you want to talk to me about? Is it convenient to talk here? Yu Yaoniang left first with a tactful look. Chen Guiyang also sent out the maids and Ziking who followed her. Sanjiu said, Princess, the master has just brought us to the capital, and we only know the basics of the rules and relationships. We can't guess, so we thought of asking you. Chen Guiyang nodded. Well, the water is deep inside. You tell us. Why did your highness the queen keep me in the palace? I can see that it is not to accompany you at all. Their attitude towards me is the same as that towards Miss Luo, Miss Shen and Miss Lin. Except for the place they live. Everything else is the same. I thought it was something else. It turns out to be this. Chen Guiyang laughed again. You forgot. My brother asked to marry you as his princess, as the principal wife, not a concubine or a sidekick. Such a big thing, and he is so insistent. He can't just marry you off blindly, right? Of course he has to make it public. There are only two things to be said for the public. The first is to go through the formalities of selecting a princess for the prince, and the second, of course, is that His Majesty, the Queen and my brother's biological mother, the concubine Shu, have to agree. For all of the above reasons, aren't you kept here for observation? Sanjiu was shocked when she heard this, and Li Ju also found it incredible. Sanjiu is 8 years older than the third prince, which is a huge age difference, whether in ancient or modern times. Li Ju himself didn't care. Men live a little shorter than women, so an 8-year difference is fine. When they get old, and it's time to die, they can die just at the same time. But do people nowadays also think it doesn't matter? Chapter 415, Tongue. Chen Guiyang laughed a few times, because of Li Ju and Sanjiu's reactions, and then said, Sanjiu said it herself. My brother asked you if it was possible, and you said that if he brought you in as the principal wife, my brother would treat you with sincerity, and you should not let him down. I'll remember it for you. Sanjiu was anxious. Your highness, are you joking with me, or are you serious? Who am I? How can I marry a prince? Why should I joke with you? At that time, you told my brother that you didn't want to be a mistress, and wanted to refuse with this. And my brother made a vow that he would definitely welcome you in through the main gate, so I knew that this matter was very appropriate. From childhood to adulthood, there was nothing he couldn't do, and he had the ability and tenacity to do it. But I didn't say anything. I'll let people see everything that ask me. I neither praised you like a flower, nor did I deliberately belittle you. Third brother has done his best, and you have never deliberately sought good results. In this way, whether it will succeed or not depends on God's will. Chen Guiyang herself hoped that this matter would succeed. In her heart, the third prince and Sanjiu were the best brothers and sisters. If she could marry the best in the end, wouldn't it be perfect? And she was also very willing to find a good arm and a good backer for Li Ju. If it was the second prince or the first prince who asked Sanjiu, or if Sanjiu was very reluctant, Chen Guiyang might have stopped him a little, but it was not the case. After Chen Guiyang finished speaking, he said, that's how it is. How about you discuss it for a while? I'll go to the garden for a walk. This place is Master Yang's small garden. I lived here when I was a child, but I haven't been here since I was 8 years old. I also planted a crab apple tree in the northwest corner of the wall that year. I wonder if it's still there? Chen Guiyang stood up and made room. She called Xiking to the northwest corner, leaving Sanjiu and Li Ju with pale and blue faces. Sanjiu was confused for a while, but Li Ju was okay. At most, he lamented that his subordinates were gone, and he had to train them all over again. What do you think? If you don't want to, I will have a sincere talk with the third prince on your behalf. No matter what, you can't be forced to marry someone you don't like. If you are interested, just let it be. It doesn't matter if I do or not. I just don't like the feeling of being calculated by others. But I can't tell the queen that I don't want to get married. This is true. Dare to be picky and despise the prince? I'm afraid you will be charged with contempt for the royal family immediately. His Majesty the Emperor and the Queen are good-tempered, but that depends on the situation. If they really dare to pluck hair from a tiger's head, they must be tired of living. In the eyes of outsiders, this marriage is a marriage of high status for us, so you cannot have any objections. If you really don't want to go, you can't say it clearly. But you don't have to worry too much. The third prince is not the kind of person who would force someone to do something he doesn't want. If it really comes to that, I will definitely talk to him about it. That's right. I've become a villain who doesn't keep his word. Sanjiu's heart did not calm down because of this. She was still annoyed and unbearable. Maybe they just want me to be a concubine, and I will definitely not agree to it. Tomorrow's worries will come tomorrow. Now that I know the reason today, things in the future will be easier. I will just be myself. I will not deliberately attract dislike, nor will I please others just to get ahead. I will still be myself. If his family likes me, I will like it too, and I won't force it. If they don't like me, just give up on me as soon as possible. I will never change. Li Ju had nothing to say after hearing this, so he kept her and Chen Guiyang for tea and sent them back to the palace before dark. Sanjiu thought about it for a long time that night, and finally she became calmer and calmer. She was just that kind of person. She had been married and had a daughter. Apart from being beautiful and having connections with Li Ju, she had nothing else to show for it. She was beautiful, but she would not be much more beautiful when she got old. If she did not make connections, or if she tried to avoid suspicion, her connections would eventually fade. She felt that the third prince should be able to figure these things out. In addition, she had to manage the industry. Even if she got married in the future, she would naturally have to control the economic channels inside and outside the industry. If she was just stuck at home, it would be better not to get married. So in the following time, Sanjiu was like a fool, doing whatever she had to do, not hiding her ability to connect with Li Ju, and not hiding her ambition to run the industry. It was not that no one attacked her with this matter, but Sanjiu was too lazy to care. Chen Guiyang simply entrusted all his industries, whether in Jinling, the capital, or Dingbo port, to Sanjiu to manage, and promised to give Sanjiu a 30% dividend in front of everyone, which made the provocative person blush. After the matter was partially settled, His Majesty the Emperor asked the Empress to let her try out Li Ju's idea. He also arranged a task for Li Ju, which was to take the underage princes and princesses to work on his experimental field. His Majesty the Emperor's excuse was learning from books is shallow, and you must practice to know it. Li Ju and Zheng, Wu, Qin and Yang had been arguing for half a month, but had not come up with anything, so it would be better to put it into practice for comparison. This practice site happened to be used for the studies of the princes and princesses. The greenhouse flower shed in the pepper house is the experimental site. The tools include high-end equipment such as microscopes that Li Ju made in his early years. Li Ju can take many courses here. The princes and princesses who have grown up, over 14 years old, are not included in this list, but they can use their free time to come here to hang out in the name of talking to their brothers and sisters. Li Ju has a lot of new things here, and the Queen's Flower Room is famous for its novelty and elegance. Therefore, the princes and princesses are happy to come here to relax after school. Among them, the eldest prince, the second prince, the third prince and Chen Guiyang were Li Ju's old acquaintances. He had to show some concern for them, not to mention that he had an excuse to take things a step further. Li Ju became familiar with them all. After everyone became familiar with each other, His Majesty the Emperor revealed the matter to the Queen. The queen's first reaction was to point out this matter to Yu Yaoniang, but she reacted instantly and took the initiative to point out Yu Yaoniang, which inevitably made people feel that Yu Yaoniang had robbed the sisters of their marriage and she had a better way to use him. In addition, the queen had another concern. She proposed that Yu Yaoniang marry Li Ju, and His Majesty the Emperor would definitely agree, but whether Li Ju was willing to marry Yu Yaoniang was directly related to Yu Yaoniang's future happiness. The queen was unwilling to take risks, so she took this opportunity to test Li Ju's intentions openly. So the queen readily agreed. This matter is not easy to handle, but since it is your majesty's wish, I will do it for you anyway. This Lodley is a good person with good character. I dare not say that he is talented, but he is capable. He is a good match for our third girl. The most important thing is that he will never let his wife fall into the same situation as Kanja before. In his words and actions, he is even more respectful to women. This alone is better than many so-called passionate young men who are nominally cherishing flowers and protecting flowers, but are actually just greedy for beauty. I can't find a more suitable person in the capital, but I just felt embarrassed about two things. Even without you telling me, I know which two they are. One is what concubine Chen meant. Concubine Chen is narrow-minded and shallow-minded. She despised Li Baksu because he was not the third or second place in the imperial examination, nor a super rank duke, nor a good-looking young man of 16 or 17. The other is that Li Baksu is 13 or 14 years older than the third lady. In folk society, sometimes people can be considered father and daughter due to this age difference. Taizong arranged a marriage between the third place in the imperial examination and Princess Fengcheng, but there was a 7-year age difference, and the former noble concubine tried to commit suicide, and even the two of us had no good face every day. This is twice the age difference. His Majesty the Emperor himself had his hesitations, but the benefits of taking Li Ju as a son-in-law far outweighed the price of solving these problems. His Majesty the Emperor still tended to take him as a son-in-law. Chapter 416, Exploring the Bottom. After instructing the queen to communicate with Li Ju privately to avoid any accidents, the emperor felt that there was nothing else important to do, so he went to the study to see Li Ju and the little princesses and princes doing the pea flower experiment. The 6th princess, the 4th prince, and the 6th princess's playmate Wu Tong, who liked to be close to the land, were all playing like clay figures. The 4th prince's study companion, the 5th princess, the 5th princess's playmate, and the 4th princess, who was older and more concerned about her appearance, who were not so close to nature, were all in a slightly backward position, holding a small notebook and recording the situation of each piece of land with a green mountain pen. Seeing His Majesty the Emperor coming with several eunuchs and palace servants, everyone hurriedly put down what they were holding and went to greet them. The 6th princess held a palm-sized praying mantis in one hand and a small green frog in the other, her big eyes blinking. Dad, look, this is a praying mantis. This is a frog. It eats mosquitoes and flies. It's our good friends. In the future, don't let the girls catch them. His Majesty the Emperor was stunned for a moment, then smiled lovingly and said, okay, Dad will issue an order. No one in the palace is allowed to harm praying mantises and frogs in the future. The 6th princess added, eating frog meat is also not allowed. At least people who can afford it are not allowed to eat frog meat. Dad, you don't know, there are so many insect eggs in frog meat. Eating it will make you sick. Wu Tong picked up a sketch, which showed the shapes of common insect eggs in frog meat, the appearance of different stages of adult development, and so on. The 6th princess kept chattering, Dad, this is a nematode, and that is a tapeworm. These two are the most common. There are also mantises and iron nematodes. In addition, there are tapeworms in the meat we eat every day, and there may be roundworms in the vegetables. These worms will grow in our bodies and even eat our flesh and blood. So you must eat clean and cooked food. The emperor, who had caught frogs to eat with food and wine during his youth, felt a churning in his stomach and his face kept changing from red to white, green to yellow and black. Li Ju was unaware and continued to praise the 6th princess for being smart and lively. The emperor followed suit and praised her a few words and promised to buy Li Ju a cart of microscopes, slides, magnifying glasses and other tools, while the princess was acting cute and silly. Then he left with a dark face. After escaping almost like a refugee, the emperor found that he had no time to say anything to Li Ju, but it seemed that there was no need to say anything. Li Ju looked like a door god, and he was very patient with children. As the saying goes, even dogs dislike children of the royal family at the age of 7 or 8. It is right that the time has come for even dogs to dislike them. He could play with a group of children who were disliked by dogs without any effort, which shows that he was a very patient person. When old friends and old buddies in Jiangnan rode privately, they would occasionally mention the good and bad of Li Ju. To say that he was not good was to show favoritism and arrogance. To say that he was good was to show compassion to the people and benevolence. It was also mentioned that Li Ju loved children very much, especially daughters. He rescued Yu Yaoniang as soon as he appeared in Qingshan County, and later recognized Huang Zhi's daughter as his adopted daughter. He was very kind to Yu Yaoniang, Xiaolian, Yuanyi and other sisters and little girls of the daughter's generation. This kindness was true kindness, the concern and love of the elders for the younger generation, rather than the shameful ghosts of some old perverts. His Majesty saw it with his own eyes, so of course he believed it even more. This is also a good thing. The more tolerant Li Ju is, the freer his daughter-in-law will be in the future. His Majesty the Emperor had such requirements for the Empress and concubines, but his wishes for his own daughter were different. Fathers are always habitually double-standard, and he is not the only one. His Majesty went to sea several times later, and even the reserved 4th princess was caught by him once again digging earthworms in the field with her skirt lifted, and Xia Liu was even more wild. Li Ju was used as a ladder by Xia Liu and her companion to climb trees and pick fruits, but he was not annoyed, just always paying attention to prevent the two little ancestors from falling. He was willing to be a daughter slave. Later, His Majesty the Emperor went to Li Ju incognito to drink wine several times, swam in the lake several times, and arranged for people to test his courage, resourcefulness, and bottom line. Some were satisfied, and some were disappointed. Of course, there were still many likable aspects on the surface. In this way, His Majesty the Emperor was more and more satisfied, and he just waited for the results of the Empress's test. The Empress carefully selected and chose an opportunity to harvest in the greenhouse, so that Li Ju could see with his own eyes the harvest of several crops he sent, and the results of the optimized cultivation on the royal side. Li Ju had no doubts, and put on his regular clothes, and went there happily. The queen personally looked after the small half-acre of land, and took good care of it, with proper water and fertilizer. Apart from the natural geographical conditions, everything else was impeccable. Corn, sweet potatoes, peanuts, rapeseed, peppers, and yao maix all contributed the best performance during the Yang dynasty. Li Ju couldn't find any problems, he was just happy. It is a good thing for the people of the world to meet a ruler who is willing to devote his energy to farming in this era. The queen herself was also very proud. The snacks that Baxio has eaten in the palace these days, those fancy ones, are mainly made with ingredients from here. Baxio should like them, and they have lived up to the seeds and rhizomes you sent year after year. Li Ju replied, "It is my luck and that the queen values it. It is even more fortunate for the people. How lucky the people are. I'm not bragging, the people who are born in this era are definitely lucky. You see, your Majesty is a benevolent majesty, who is willing to consider the people in everything. I, concubine Shu, concubine Xian, are not the kind of wives of officials who are obsessed with extravagance and indulgence, and covet wealth and enjoyment. Even more fortunately, they also encountered the rations you brought. People who could not survive can survive. People who could not eat enough can eat enough. It may not be a big change for a while, but for every living person, this is hope. This is God's blessing. As time goes by, the population will increase. Even if the productivity you mentioned is limited, with more people, more things can be made. Your Majesty will also issue a birth order next year, and will give some food and cloth to families who raise children and support the elderly every year as a reward. As food gradually increases, it is natural to encourage childbirth to obtain population. Population and land constitute the foundation of a country. Any ruler will work in this direction. It is natural." Li Ju's thoughts drifted to national plans. He didn't care about the harem not interfering in government affairs. He knew that his wife's pillow talk was very powerful. Of course, a queen who cared about the people of the world was far better than a queen whose eyes were only as big as the palace. He was very willing to talk things out with the queen. Unexpectedly, the queen changed the subject and turned to him. Sir, you have passed the age of 30, and it is reasonable for you to get married. Next year, His Majesty wants to reward married couples. Why don't you consider taking this reward? Chapter 417. I started crying while laughing. When he traveled through time, no one said that he would be forced to marry in ancient times. Li Ju broke out in a cold sweat. I don't have such plans for the time being. I haven't met anyone I like, so I'd rather be single. The queen straightened up, took a handkerchief from Ying and wiped her hands, and the palace servants handed her a porcelain basin and a water jug to wash her hands. Another little palace maid handed her a handkerchief to wipe. The whole process was smooth and made Li Ju a little nervous for some reason. These days, Your Majesty arranged for Boxiu to meet so many ladies, including the pearls of princes and sons, but there was not a single one he liked. I don't understand. What does Your Majesty mean? Li Ju was confused. Where did he meet any ladies these days? The queen said with a straight face. These days, you taught Aina and Hela to jump up and down in the fields, like monkeys, and there were always a few pretty girls watching them. Have you forgotten? Li Ju couldn't remember anything, so he could only reply, I really didn't notice it. I think it's not the right time. In fact, the queen was very satisfied with this answer. However, the queen still had a stern face, as if she was a little angry. Then, do you think the princesses of my family are not pleasing enough? Princess, you have seen them, right? Li Ju's sixth sense came online like a stroke of genius, and he changed the words really there is no difference to I'm of low status, and cannot speak to Your Majesty. I'm a man outside the court, and dare not look at the princess. You are so cunning. How can you speak so sweetly to such an honest person? The queen didn't know whether she really thought so, or was just warning her. After saying this, she asked directly, I won't beat around the bush with you. In fact, I was entrusted by someone to ask you if you are willing to marry into our family. I think that Boxiu's temper has offended many people, and may offend more people in the future. You are the son-in-law of His Majesty and us. If people outside want to report you, they will have to think twice, and His Majesty can also protect you unreasonably. The queen spoke very slowly, paying attention to Li Ju's expression as she spoke. Seeing that he just listened silently with his hands down, she felt 80% sure in her heart. After saying the previous words, the queen asked Ying Jiao and others to step aside a little, and asked, what do you think of our third daughter? Although her mother offended you, it is not her fault. She grew up under my knees, and was raised by me. I know her character and talent best. She can get along with you in every way. In fact, I'm very reluctant to let her go, but I also understand that no one else can be better or more suitable than you. So, I rashly asked you this. If you like it, just say yes, and I will naturally issue an order. If you don't like it, don't force it. Anyway, I will take care of it, and you can't be blamed. In this way, you will not be disgusted with each other in the future, which will delay both of you. Li Ju reluctantly remembered the appearance of the third princess. She was a very taciturn, gentle and docile woman. She should be the ideal wife of the ancient people, good-looking, well-educated, docile, and has an emperor as a father. But that was not what he wanted. I'm too old to be a match for the princess. Men in the world do not live as long as women, not to mention that I'm in my 30s. How can I be a match for a girl of 28 when I'm old? Do you want the princess to be a widow for decades? The queen couldn't help but secretly delighted when she heard this, but she didn't show it on her face. Seeing that Li Ju's face, which usually didn't have any expression, was a little embarrassed, she smiled and said, that makes sense. Why are you nervous? If you don't like someone, I won't force you. Does my daughter have to worry about getting married? Does she have to hang herself on this crooked tree of yours? Okay, continue to accompany me for a walk. Even if you are not the son-in-law of concubine Chen, you can be my nephew, and you are also a junior, not a big deal. In front are the bamboos brought back by Kanja Penglay bamboo, Luahan bamboo, Xiangfei bamboo, purple bamboo, Nan bamboo, Mozo bamboo, arrow bamboo, all kinds of colors. I haven't gone to see how they look yet. Li Ju wiped his forehead, sighed, and followed. After strolling around the garden in the morning, Li Ju was called by the emperor in the afternoon to give some instructions. It was for the display and use of the steam engine that Li Ju brought. Li Ju wrote some things a few days ago to promote his own miscellaneous knowledge in machinery, and especially mentioned the steam engine. Others were fine. Mines, ships, and carriages had already thought of the use of steam engines. The emperor didn't care much until he was reminded that this thing could be used on ships. Then he figured out its significance in business trips and called people over. Li Ju was not a fool. The queen's proposal of marriage was such a big deal, and the one she proposed was a princess. The emperor couldn't be unaware of it. Since he knew, he was willing. Now that Li Ju had refused the matter, he was worried that the emperor would punish him with this. However, after listening to the whole afternoon, the emperor was really only interested in machinery and had no other intentions, so Li Ju swallowed his heart back into his stomach. After the political discussion was over, Li Ju still returned to his house with ease and sorted out the machinery so that the emperor could see its operation with his own eyes. His Majesty the Emperor was also relaxed and came to the pepper room happily just to ask how the Empress and Li Ju talked. The Empress pretended to be unhappy. What do you mean by how? He is just a blockhead. How can we talk? If his parents were here, it would be great. We have already talked to his parents. Why should he be happy or not? His Majesty was surprised. Why, from what I heard, he doesn't even think that our princesses are his soulmates. Then I don't understand. What kind of soulmates does he need? The Empress pouted. Your Majesty, go ask him yourself. I just acted as a matchmaker this once, but I didn't succeed. If I tell others, I will lose face. She is really ungrateful. I will never say it again in the future. His Majesty rarely saw the Empress being humiliated. Since the Empress married him, she has always been dignified and virtuous, abided by the code of conduct for women, and was outstanding in virtue, speech, appearance and merit. How often has she shown such a vivid performance? His Majesty the Emperor put aside the matter of Li Ju, signed on the couch, and only asked the Queen, how did he refuse? Tell me, I will settle the score with him to vent your anger. Then you must keep your word. I know that he is one of your Majesty's favorite ministers now, and you will not really punish him. I thought, when he really gets married, I will detain his wife in the palace for 3 years, so that he can experience what it means to be anxious and frustrated, and that will be enough. That's easy, as you say. But he has even returned the third lady. Who else can he fall in love with? What did he say? Tell us quickly, don't keep us in suspense. Okay, let me think about it. Well, at the beginning, I asked him, you have been in Beijing for so long, and you have met so many noble ladies, is there any you like? He said never seen one. I was surprised. He has been teaching Aina, Henna and others in the flower shed for more than a day or two. Miss Zeng and Miss Eluo often go to listen. He really didn't notice it? Well, it is true that he never paid attention to it. Well, I can't tell what kind of person he likes. So I said, how about I recruit him to be my son-in-law? Strange, he didn't refuse at this time. The Emperor said, then it's done. Akang and Awu are already married, or have been granted marriage, and are preparing to get married, so it's only the third child. The fourth child is only 13 or 14 years old, and his stature is not as good as the girls around him, so it's not necessary. How can it be done? When I heard that he didn't refuse, it seemed that he had something to say, so I asked him, then, how about the third lady? He had something to say at this time, saying that he was old, and it would be inappropriate to die early in the future, leaving the princess alone in the world, so he firmly disagreed. The Queen sneered, Your Majesty, isn't he deliberately making things difficult for me? We are of such an age, and he still says he is old. I think he is just making up excuses. It would be better if he refused before I called out the third miss, saying I regard the princess as a sister at home. I don't have that idea, then I can understand it. Anyway, he is used to using this excuse to refuse people. The emperor saw that the queen was really angry and her face showed some redness of shame and anger, and he laughed for a long time. However, as he laughed, the emperor's face returned to normal and he stopped laughing. Chapter 418, Mother's Heart. Wait, Li Baxi was silent when you mentioned the princess, but when you mentioned the third girl, he said that he was too old and the third girl was too young. Zitting, this Li Baxi, isn't he thinking about our eldest girl? His Majesty came to his senses. He didn't oppose the matchmaking, but rejected the specific candidate. Doesn't this mean that he is actually thinking about someone else in his heart? He thinks the third girl is young, so there are only the eldest princess and the second princess. The second princess just got married, and she has rarely seen Li Ju, so there is only Chen Guiyang left. When the queen heard this, she realized what had happened. She made a look of surprise and doubt. How dare he be so picky about our daughter? How dare he? If I have 10 daughters, would I marry 10 of them to him? The queen was so angry that the emperor slightly dispelled his anger. Don't be upset, Zitong. He would not dare to be so rude. I think there is some misunderstanding. The queen's face was red, and she didn't know whether it was because of shame or anger. She said, I don't think there is any misunderstanding. Your Majesty said that. It reminds me that the letters sent back from Chen Guiyang often mentioned Feng Ranghao. For a while, she even worked as a teacher in Feng Ranghao's school. In the first year, she mentioned him in every letter, and in the second year, half of the letters were related to Feng Ranghao. Could it be that Feng Ranghao did it on purpose at that time? He cast his net too far. That shouldn't be the case. Kangja hadn't divorced yet. The emperor hesitated. Besides, he is a smart man. He shouldn't have such thoughts. He is picky about our daughter, but he is not arrogant to such an extent. And although Kangja is divorced, she has had a relationship with the Yang family. If he marries Kangja, he will definitely offend the Confucian scholars of their Yang family. Li Baxi is extremely smart. Why can't he turn this corner? The emperor thought about it again. It's hard to say about this matter. It's tricky, very tricky. But if it works, it's not a bad idea. So, Zitting, you first ask Kangja what he thinks. If Kangja doesn't mind, I will call Li Ju to question him first and scare him. Then the rest will be easier. The queen had been planning for half a day, waiting for his majesty to say this plan himself. She was satisfied in her heart and said, Your Majesty loves foreign ministers. Those who don't know, think that is your son. If Kangja really likes him, it's fine. I can't twist Kangja's waist with my arm. If he doesn't like him, send Li Baxi back quickly. Anyway, Miss Ao has seen him. There is no need to keep him. Keeping him is a disaster. The queen meant that Zhao Sanjiu was an official of Li Ju after all, and when it came to arranging a marriage for the third prince, if Li Ju was left in the capital, it would be inevitable that people would gossip and talk about him. However, if Chen Guiyang's marriage really happened, the queen would naturally have another set of statements at that time. His Majesty also agreed with it. The day of the granted marriage will not be too far away, so the matter of Li Ju and Chen Guiyang that was forked out must be dealt with as soon as possible. The queen said that she would ask Chen Guiyang just for the formality. No one knows a daughter better than her mother. She was 80% sure that Chen Guiyang liked him. I just don't know if His Majesty the Emperor can deal with Li Ju. It feels 50 to 50. The 50% probability of failure is not because Li Ju is ruthless, but because His Majesty the Emperor messed up. Thinking so, the queen sent His Majesty the Emperor away, turned around and went to Chen Guiyang's room. Things here are easy to talk about. The queen was silent for a long time, making the atmosphere awkward and tense. Finally, under her daughter's concerned and uneasy eyes, she went straight to the point. I want to marry you to Feng Ranghao. Are you willing? Your father originally wanted to marry your third sister to him, but Feng Ranghao refused in one sentence, saying that he was too old than your third sister, and it was not suitable. I think his voiceover said that your third sister was not old enough, but you were suitable. If you don't like it, I will go back and let your father give up. If you like it, give me a word. No matter how hard it is, I will let you marry the right man, and you will live in peace from now on. Chen Guiyang paused. She had never thought of such a thing. Etiquette is a great defense, stricter than the laws of heaven. A divorced commoner girl still has the opportunity to remarry. The princess's actions are a role model for women all over the world. How can a divorced princess challenge such strict constraints? Yu Yaoniang was happy in her heart, but she has always been self-disciplined and has never done anything she shouldn't do because of an outburst of emotions. So she held back her joy. But she was reluctant to give up this glimmer of hope. The queen asked her about such a thing. Maybe this is the last chance. Yu Yaoniang did not answer but asked, is Marquis Fengrang willing? Is the Grand Tutor willing? Are the censors willing? The queen knew that she was willing, but she had doubts. Marquis Fengrang will certainly agree. Whether the Grand Tutor is willing or not is not up to him. I'm keeping Shanjie just for this day. That will be his handle for life. When he is old, it won't be a problem. You don't have to think too much about what the censors say. If it really works out, I will let you go to Jinling with Marquis Fengrang and stay there for 5 or 8 years before coming back. No one can make a fuss about this. Besides, Marquis Fengrang is probably not easy to bully. He has so many strange things in his hands. Who dares to offend him? If they want to have a piece of meat, the censors only say a few words, but he has a cart of twisted theories waiting for him. The queen finally showed a smile on her face. My son, since you are not unwilling, I will definitely be able to get this done. You can prepare for your marriage in peace. Zyking, serve your master well, and don't let the people below talk nonsense. The queen was very smooth here, just waiting for the movement from His Majesty the Emperor. The next day, the Emperor saw that there was nothing particularly important, so he asked someone to ask Li Ju. He knew that he could demonstrate the steam engine today, so he happily led people out of the palace incognito to the house where Li Ju currently lived. After so many days of shouting, the scholars surrounding the house finally decreased. Otherwise, it was still uncertain whether the emperor could go. It was inconvenient for him to drive people away when he went out incognito. What if there was an accident with so many people around? Finally, there were fewer people today, which made the eunuchs and guards who were preparing to clear the place in the name of Duke Song feel relieved. In Li Ju's house, the steam engine has been improved for 2 generations, and now the small steam engine made by Xiao Zhanggang is being tested. Li Ju made a large sand table with fine sand, put a boat in the sand table, and used the steam engine as the power to push it. The boat is a specially made small boat, but it is also as big as a room. No matter how fine the sand is, the friction is really not small, so the boat moves very slowly. But no matter how slow it moves, it is enough to shock everyone. A ship that can move without human or animal power is essentially different from everything we have now. With the addition of wind power, it must be very flexible when used on the sea. With a larger load, faster speed, and Li Ju's nautical chart and description of the new world, a brand new world is about to open its arms to Daeang. This is a feeling that His Majesty the Emperor suddenly had after observing the steam engine boat, which comes from the absolutely keen sense of smell of a gifted ruler, military strategist, and politician. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 419. Things go wrong. Li Ju couldn't help but get excited when he saw the emperor coming and greeted him with a big smile. Your Majesty, the Duke is here. His Majesty the Emperor often used the title of Duke of Song when he went out. People who were familiar with him knew it, and Li Ju knew it too. His Majesty the Emperor had already put aside what he wanted to ask and pointed to the wooden boat crawling at a constant speed in the sand pool and asked, What is this? Your Majesty, this is the steam engine. Li Ju pulled open a corner covered with cotton cloth next to him. The prototype looks like this, and the one installed on the boat has been improved by craftsman Xiao Zhang, and it can be enlarged and used on the current building ships. I wonder how much manpower can be freed up with just this one. All the increases in farming in the past 10 years can only be equal to this thing. So important? Farming solves population and people's livelihood problems. His Majesty the Emperor thought that the steam engine was important, but he didn't expect Li Ju to compare it with the improvements in farming in the past 10 years. Tell me about it in detail. My lord, just think like this. The load capacity of the steam engine can be used everywhere. Transportation is the most basic. In addition to transporting things, there are many other places where it can be used. I'm afraid that I can't explain it clearly at the moment. I will write a memorial to your majesty and copy it for you. I will also ask your majesty to give me a vacant land to build it. In a few days, I will invite your majesty and the duke to see the trams pushed by the steam engine. It is really easy to cross mountains and ridges. His majesty immediately thought of the transportation of troops and the appointment of officials. Faster large-scale transportation means that he can transport soldiers and carriages to any city at any time, and his orders can be quickly delivered to various villages and towns. He will realize the complete control of the central court over the local areas and press the damn patriarchal system to death in the corner. His majesty could not think of the impact this would have on the production relations in the ruling order, but judging from the part he could think of, this thing can already be enshrined in the gods. You are right. Then write it carefully. Don't worry about the format or rules. Just write whatever you want. It's just a private matter between us. By the way, who is the little clock craftsman you mentioned? He improved such a good thing for you, and he should be rewarded. The other participants have also made contributions and deserve rewards. You can decide the specific reward method yourself. Barks you. Everyone was overjoyed when they heard this. They hurriedly thanked the emperor and found the little clock craftsman to show to Duke Song. The little clock craftsman didn't dare to breathe, trembling like a quail, and bowed to Duke Song several times. His Majesty the Emperor did not blame him for his lack of etiquette, but only asked who came up with the steam engine, how it was made, etc. The young engineer Zong was smart but honest, so he told the truth. The blueprint was given by the master, and my father and the potter. Many people helped. There were 5 or 6 blacksmiths who drew the blueprint, refined rubber, mixed coal and charcoal. I just contributed a little bit of strength, which is not worthy of any praise. His Majesty the Emperor was even more satisfied, and nodded and said, "You are not self-crediting, and are willing to help your partners. This is good. How can you not reward those who have made contributions? Talk to your master about this later. Since you are so honest, I will give you an extra grace. Tell me, what is your wish?" I will go back and report to His Majesty, and I will ask His Majesty to do it for you. The young engineer Zhang really had something on his mind, and he looked at Li Ju. Li Ju didn't notice it at first, but saw it after his mother reminded him. His little move here fell into the eyes of His Majesty the Emperor, and His Majesty the Emperor said, "Why, you don't believe it? You still need to see what your master means?" Li Ju said, "The Duke of Jiuo is a man of his words. If you have something on your mind, just tell him. Don't just ask someone to give you a wife." Everyone knows that Li Ju hates these forced marriages the most. Xiao Zhanggang hurriedly replied, "How dare I? Since the Duke of Jiuo has said so, I will put forward an idea. Even if it can't be accomplished, it doesn't matter. Please don't blame me, my lord, because it's my fate." His Majesty the Emperor became interested. "You tell me, as long as you are not a big villain, I will agree. I want to ask for the status of a scholar for my future son." Xiao Zhanggang gritted his teeth and said, "He is a craftsman. His father is also a craftsman, and his family has been carpenters for generations. When the harvest is good, or when he meets a generous master like Li Ju, he can save up a fortune. If he encounters a bad year, or is bullied by a group of people, he will lose all his production tools and become a beggar. Craftsmen like them who have no land, do not participate in farming, are registered with the government, and are also merchants. Watermills are considered merchants, cannot participate in the imperial examinations. This ban will affect 3 generations. The previous dynasty stipulated this, and it was also used in this dynasty." His Majesty the Emperor figured out the whole story and said, "These minor matters should be settled with you. You can rest assured to receive rewards, marry, and have children. This is really a small matter. With the Emperor's order, it is not a big deal to make an exception, or he and his father Da Zhanggang and grandfather Lao Zhanggang's craftsman registration can be eliminated, and Xiao Zhang's son Xiao Zhang can naturally participate in the imperial examinations." So His Majesty the Emperor asked Feng Nian to write down this matter and deal with it when he returned, and then forgot about it. He looked at the steam engine boat with great interest for a while, and operated it himself, and had a good time. At this time, Yaoniang came to tell him that the food was ready, and asked where it was. She looked at His Majesty the Emperor, and signaled Li Ju to ask if anyone wanted to eat. Li Ju himself did not feel anything, but looking at the time, it was already early afternoon, and it was almost time for the people in the capital to have dinner. When there were classes at home, Yaoniang and the others would be smart enough to prepare meals at the time when the people in the capital would have dinner. Li Ju hurriedly asked, "Is a duke going to have dinner at my humble abode, or do you have other arrangements?" The emperor waved his fan and said, "Just eat here. But I heard that your family is simple, so I won't trouble you." Feng Nian, ask someone to send a few boxes to add dishes to Marquis Fengrang, and ask someone to quickly inform the lady that I will not be going back for dinner today, but you have to save some for me for the midnight snack. Feng Nian went to take care of it, and the emperor took his people around, and finally asked them to set up the table under the big tree in the backyard, so that they could eat and drink tea in the shade of the whole garden. Yaoniang, the wife of housekeeper Wu, Gizi and others took care of everything, and handed it over to the emperor's eunuchs to take over and serve, and then they all withdrew to have their own dinner. His Majesty saw that they worked efficiently. Although they were not polite, they were open and honest. He could not help but praise them, saying, "Your Majesty, you are too kind. The most important thing for me is to get things done. I have to give way to other things. So I hire people based on their talents instead of their appearance. We should respect each other and not be too formal. People outside may not like it, but I think it's okay." Chapter 420, Some Suggestions for Girls' Schools. Employ people and talents instead of sex. That's your style. His Majesty the Emperor was about to tease Li Ju, saying that Li Ju's father-in-law and mother-in-law would be happy in the future, but suddenly he remembered what he had to do at his house, so he dismissed everyone else and left Feng Nian to serve him. Yaoniang and Chusan went out to buy today and bought quite a lot of fish, shrimp, crabs, and clams. There were 2 home-cooked dishes from the south of the Yangtze River on the table. One was braised mixed fish in red sauce and the other was steamed hairy crab with sujayang. His Majesty the Emperor added a few famous dishes from the capital, such as roasted deer, roasted goose and roasted pigeon. He picked out a few crispy snacks and ate them. He was already half full, so he dismissed everyone else and caught a big female crab to peel and pick by himself, just as a way to digest the food. While struggling with the crab claws with the help of Feng Nian, the emperor smiled and said to Li Ju, "Bo Xiu, since I met you in person, I have always admired you and regarded you as my own son or nephew." Li Ju was stunned for a moment, quickly put down his chopsticks and took a cup of tea to rinse his mouth, and replied, "Your Majesty loves me deeply, and I have nothing to repay you." Li Ju was not saying empty words. These days, he and the emperor often met and asked questions. Li Ju gradually found that the emperor was different from what he imagined. At least the side he showed to Li Ju was gentle and tolerant, and from his decrees, the emperor really attached great importance to the people's sentiments, and would not unconditionally tolerate his ministers and confidants. This was rare in the feudal dynasty. His Majesty the Emperor looked at him seriously, not perfunctorily, and continued, "So, I have a concern. Can you solve it for me?" Li Ju thought it was a big deal, and replied seriously, "At your command, Your Majesty." His Majesty the Emperor nodded and said, "You are familiar with the eldest Princess Chengyang, and it was you who suggested Chengyang's divorce. This is what worries me. The Queen and I are both in our prime years, and I don't know how many more years we can take care of her. If one day the Queen and I pass away, will the future Emperor be good to Chengyang, and will he protect Chengyang from the ridicule and slander of others?" Li Ju didn't dare to respond, as this involved a very sensitive topic about matters between men and women. His Majesty the Emperor continued, "Think carefully, this is the way the world is. If a woman wants to live without relying on others' eyes, there are only 3 ways. One is to be like your subordinate, Madame Zhao, who is talented and has met a mentor. She also has a plan in her mind, so she can live. One is to give birth to a good son, and the son must be filial to his mother, so she can live without worries. The last is that her husband is willing to protect her and love her, which is the most appropriate and the least appropriate. The first one is difficult, because it is difficult to find a mentor and opportunities. The second one is difficult, because it is not up to you to have children, and you don't know whether your son can grow up to be successful. The third one is to tie your life to others. But as a father, I think about it, and I really can't think of any other way. Even your subordinate, Madam Zhao, has to look at your face. If she hadn't met you, she would have 18 skills, but couldn't use them, and I'm afraid she wouldn't have a good ending. His Majesty's words were all true, and it was clear that he had truly understood the actual situation, and his love for his daughter was obvious. Li Ju had not yet understood what His Majesty meant, and he really thought that His Majesty was simply worried about Chen Guiyang. So he immediately thought of another route he had planned for Yu Yaoniang before, but Yu Yaoniang had chosen the conventional route herself. Your Majesty, in my humble opinion, with your Majesty and the Queen's care, the princess can not only rest assured, but also find another way out for women all over the world. When I was in Jinling, I discovered that the princess was good at teaching and educating people. Such a talent should not be missed. Long before I became successful, there were women in Jiangnan who were well read and raised their young disciples and grandchildren to study for the imperial examinations and become successful, but unfortunately they were in seclusion and no one knew about their contributions. Later, Your Highness the Princess taught several classes in the school in disguise, and the audience was full. I was thinking that perhaps people have always overlooked the abilities of women throughout the ages. They can also be teachers, and they can also cultivate talents. Therefore, I'm willing to pay money and write to your Majesty requesting the establishment of a girls' school with the princess as the head of the school to cultivate women with expertise. His Majesty the Emperor did not expect that Li Ju could give him such a big detail, and he thought the idea was good. His Majesty's own harem is full of beauties, but the only ones who really make him feel comfortable and at ease are the Empress, Concubine Shu, and Concubine D. Others, such as Concubine Chen and Concubine Ai, are all people who hurt him every day. Think about it carefully. The Queen was born in a famous family. She grew up in the common people when she was a child. She read books and saw the people's sentiments. Concubine Shu was born in a wealthy family in Jiangnan. She had a hard time as a widow for several years. Concubine D was the granddaughter of a founding general. Her grandmother was a famous talented woman in the previous dynasty. It is said that her talent is comparable to that of the top scholar. So, they all have family education. If the family education is good, the girl will be good. Concubine Chen didn't know a single word when she entered the palace. Sure enough, she often did some magical operations later. Are there any surprises? Yes, some girls don't have a good background, but they are studious and motivated. Then the bad background is nothing. So girls' schools really have a lot to do. Men are busy outside every day. Who can take care of the family? Aren't the mother and daughter-in-law the ones who have the final say in the family affairs? Aren't the children and the family raised by their grandmothers, mothers, and sisters? The so-called teaching by words and deeds. If the female family members can't help the wall, what kind of descendants can they raise? If the female family members are ignorant and dote on their children and grandchildren, what good will the descendants of this family have? Although the big families all have a clan school, how long can the whole family learn in the clan school? Maybe if you make bad friends, it will be 10 times worse. Women should also read more and gain more knowledge. Set up a girls' school. Catch Chen Guiyang as a private school teacher. In the long run, the ladies who graduated from the girls' school are all Chen Guiyang's apprentices, occupying the moral status of respecting teachers. Who will dare to disrespect Chen Guiyang in the future? His Majesty's thinking suddenly became clear. He didn't know that the girls' school that Li Ju wanted was to teach knowledge. He wanted the girls' school to teach rules, morality, the 4 books and 5 classics, virtue, words, and merits, and to cultivate in the direction of virtuous wives. Li Ju saw that His Majesty the Emperor seemed very happy, and felt that His Majesty the Emperor was really a good emperor who was willing to think one step further for the people. Although the two people thought about poles apart, they still reached a consensus on this matter. His Majesty the Emperor happily clinked glasses of wine with Li Ju, and he completely forgot about what he had thought of before. After the meal, His Majesty the Emperor happily returned to the palace to review memorials for a while. When it was almost time, he turned around and went to the pepper room to have a midnight snack with his wife and discuss the girls' school. His Majesty the Emperor even thought of the name of the girls' school, which was called Chengyang Girls' School. The Queen was also very happy. Although Chengyang did not say yes explicitly, it looked like she was willing. His Majesty the Emperor was also in high spirits, which meant that Li Ju did not object, so the matter was settled. Chengyang's future was finally settled. The couple had a happy meal together. They looked at their daughter who was eating with them, and were very happy, but Chengyang looked uncomfortable. He ate 2 mouthfuls of the 8 treasures liquor, and left on the pretext of something. As soon as her daughter left, the Queen asked happily, "Is Marquis Fengrang also very happy?" Archangel is happy in his heart. The Emperor slapped his thigh and said, "Oh no, I forgot." Chapter 421, Romance Case. The Emperor came back from his trip to discuss an idea for Chengyang's retirement, but he forgot the main business. The Empress turned hostile on the spot and sat on the edge of the Kang wiping tears in anger. His Majesty came over awkwardly, Zitong, Liuking my wife, and coaxed the Empress for a long time before she came back, but she was still angry and said, "I'll see what you say." His Majesty bit the bullet and said in detail, "My dear, why are you angry? My good man, Marquis Fengrang said something new. I'll tell you about it. I guarantee that, after listening to it, you will no longer worry about Kanja, and you will forget about the marriage like me." The Empress was skeptical. "Then, you talk first." His Majesty then used Li Ju's suggestion on establishing a girls' school, and combined with his own understanding of women's education, he praised the girls' school to the sky. This matter itself is nothing, and the Empress also thinks this is a good idea, which can prevent many people from burying their talents, because they do not get a good family education. But it's just that this matter itself is good. Is this what the Queen wants to hear? What the Queen cares about is her daughter's lifelong event. Are there conflicts between being a headmistress and getting married? No. This is a strong combination. With Li Ju's personality, he would never object to Chengyang being the headmistress. He even proposed this matter. How could he object? Isn't it wonderful for Chengyang to have both a career and a husband? The Queen couldn't help but feel resentful. It goes without saying that His Majesty the Emperor loves his daughter, but he loves his daughter too much, so he is always reluctant to let his daughter get married. Before, the good young men in the capital were dragged on, and they had to choose the son of Yang Teifu from the short ones. Now, he has simply forgotten the serious matter. His Majesty the Emperor spoke for a long time with great interest. Seeing that the Empress still had a resentful look on her face, he thought about it carefully and felt that what he said was correct, so he asked, "Why, Zitong is not happy that Chengyang is taking this assignment? How could that be? Am I the kind of person who doesn't know what's good for him? Your Majesty's care and love for Kanja has always made me jealous, but when I think about it, it's all because of your Majesty's true love for your daughter. I can't wait to be happy for her. I can only advise you to do more, not to do less. I'm not happy because, anyway, your Majesty doesn't understand." "What don't you understand?" "They don't understand the loneliness of being alone. If Kanja has no feelings for Marquis Fengrang, I would never have mentioned this. But Kanja does have feelings for him, so, as a mother, of course I hope that Kanja gets what he wants." As the Empress spoke, she stood up and pressed the Emperor's shoulders and acupoints. She and His Majesty the Emperor had been through thick and thin together for so many years, and she knew him best. Sure enough, she made His Majesty feel relaxed with just one move. His Majesty the Emperor immediately felt that, yes, it is time to have a beloved person who understands and cares for her. Chengyang needs more than just future life security, she also needs emotional companionship. I understand what Zitong means. Then I will ask Bo Xiu again. Let me see the time. Fengnian, find an opportunity for me and summon Marquis Fengrang to discuss matters. Fengnian and the lecturer decided to schedule it for tomorrow afternoon. However, the next day was not peaceful. His Majesty the Emperor went to rest at Concubine Shu's place that night. He had just gotten up in the morning and was still in the bathroom. He was wondering why the third brother did not come to serve him and accompany him to court today when he heard a sudden commotion outside. His Majesty the Emperor does not like to ask about trivial matters in the harem unless it involves the previous dynasty or happens to catch his eye. Today, even if it happened, His Majesty the Emperor asked someone to ask about it. After a while, someone replied that it turned out that Miss Shen was ordered by the Queen to deliver a string of ornaments that His Majesty the Emperor left in the Pepper Palace yesterday. Unexpectedly, when passing by Taking Pond, her feet slipped and fell into the water, and she was just rescued. This was originally a trivial matter, but the problem lies in the rescue. Miss Shen insisted that it was the third prince who rescued her ashore, and the third prince was indeed soaked. But the third prince firmly denied this. His Majesty the Emperor became interested when he heard this. Isn't this the forced attachment behavior that has only been heard in rumors and never seen in reality? What a good show. He didn't even care that his own son was in this show and hurriedly dragged Concubine Shu to watch the fun. As soon as she walked to the corridor, she heard the third prince say righteously, "Young lady, if you blame me again, I will ask the Ministry of Internal Affairs to investigate the case. I'm going to get married, so I will naturally keep my chastity and dare not cross the line. How could I be involved with other women? The water in Taking Pond is only 4 feet deep, and you are more than 5 feet tall. Your life is not in danger. Why should I save you? There are so many people who can swim nearby. How can it be my turn to save you? Can't you see those around? Otherwise, there are ropes and bamboo poles here. I can help you up. Why should I jump into the water to save you? Although I'm stupid, I'm not so stupid." The Emperor was more and more surprised as he listened. He didn't think that this fool had such a quick reaction ability. While thinking, His Majesty the Emperor and Concubine Shu turned around and showed up. Miss Shen, who was crying on the side, seemed to have found her backbone. She ran up in 3 or 2 steps and fell down on the steps with another cry, crying blood. "Your Majesty, please make a decision for my daughter." Third prince, he hugged me, but didn't admit it. "My daughter has no choice but to die." The third prince, who had just changed into a clean outer shirt and robe, also sat down on the steps. "Your Majesty, please make a decision for me too. I came to pay my respects to my father early in the morning, but before I even entered the door, someone poured a basin of water on my head and chilled me to the bone. I haven't even seen who it was, but I was first accused of such a big black pot. My innocence has been said to be gone. How can I marry a wife? I'm wronged." The third prince's voice was much louder than Miss Shen's, and he directly covered Miss Shen. Miss Shen's face turned green. Today was indeed her plan. First, she bribed the little girl to pour water on the third prince's head, and then she ambushed him on the road that the third prince had to pass, just to rely on the third prince. But the third prince, he is really not a human being. How could there be such a ruthless man in the world? She really regretted it. Miss Shen had to consider whether to pretend to commit suicide to escape, hit the pillar or dive. No, she couldn't dive. If the third prince said that the water was only 4 feet deep, she would go to the water. Wouldn't it be obvious that she was faking suicide? The third prince didn't care what she thought. He just suppressed Miss Shen with his voice. For a while, the noise in front of the Shu-Fui Palace was one after another. His Majesty was dizzy and lost interest in watching the show. He shouted, "Enough. How shameful." His Majesty was angry and finally stopped this evil trend. Miss Shen didn't dare to make a noise anymore and could only cry softly. The third prince was silent, but judging by his expression, he might start to quarrel again at any time. His Majesty the Emperor did not have time to stay here for long, as he had to be present in the Council of State. He was just about to ask Concubine Shu to handle this matter when he suddenly saw several people walking over from the side and quietly standing aside. The one leading the way was a woman wearing a sky blue shirt with falling flowers and lotus flowers, who was elegant and graceful. She was Sanjiu, who was ordered to check the situation. There were also several palace maids beside her. His Majesty the Emperor was in a good mood and pointed at Sanjiu and said, "You, yes, that's you, Madam Zhao, right? I'll leave this matter to you." When I come back, you must give me a clear result. Chapter 422, A Little Test of Skills. How does it feel to be blamed by the emperor? Thanks for the invitation. I'm Yu Yaoniang, and just got off the plane. I feel a little silly. Zhao Sanjiu reluctantly agreed. The emperor knew that it was reliable to let Sanjiu do it, so he went to the Council of State without looking back, not caring about how embarrassed the group of people were who were left behind. The third prince was relieved first. Sanjiu could not harm him, and would not be deceived by Miss Shen's sweet words. Concubine Shu was stunned for a moment, and then she understood what the emperor meant. He wanted to see Sanjiu's decisiveness, so she was relieved. Others were puzzled. They didn't know why the emperor suddenly asked a little girl who had been in the palace for only a few days to take on such an important matter. Miss Shen's face turned pale. She and Sanjiu lived in the back room of the Pepper House, and they knew each other very well. Miss Shen's tricks had no effect on Sanjiu, a veteran in the world. Sanjiu knew Miss Shen's thoughts better than anyone else. Even when Miss Shen first tried to stir up trouble to tie Li Ju and Sanjiu together, she was pushed back by Sanjiu as soon as she started to sow discord. Later, Sanjiu warned her clearly, if you want to marry a husband of your dreams, go and fight for yours. Why involve innocent people? Because you are a girl. I know it is not easy for you. I will not say anything this time. If it happens again, I will definitely find someone to do justice. Miss Shen wanted to be a princess, so of course she couldn't leave such a big stain. From then on, she could only avoid Sanjiu. Miss Shen was stunned on the spot. How could His Majesty entrust such an important matter to an outsider with no name or status? In an instant, Sanjiu had figured out the cause and effect. His Majesty was absolutely sure that this matter would not go too far, so he would just find someone to take charge. Concubine Shu also figured it out and took the initiative to say, since His Majesty said so, then listen to Miss Zhao. Where do you start to investigate, Miss Zhao? The third prince also looked at Zhao Sanjiu with hope. There is nothing to investigate. It has nothing to do with the third prince. In this dynasty, during the midsummer season, the princes who have not left the palace to start a family get up at 5 AM in the morning and go out at 1 PM. Calculating the time, they had just arrived at the edge of the pond when the incident happened. There was a difference of no more than a few tens of seconds. How could he have had the time to save people? Moreover, the third prince's hair was wet. Among the clothes he changed, the outer sand shirt was more thoroughly wet than the lining robe. However, there were still some places on his trouser legs and shoes that were wet from soaking, but the soles of his shoes were completely dry. This did not seem like the result of jumping into the water to save people. Moreover, if the prince really jumped into the pond to save people, the people who followed him did not dare not jump. They are all clean now, and only 2 or 3 people have water stains on their bodies, which means that they did not go into the water, which is consistent with what His Highness said just now, being saved by someone. It was a situation where the water splashed all over me, so it wasn't the third prince who jumped into the pond to save people. I think Miss Shen made a mistake. Whoever saved Miss Shen, if they felt embarrassed in public, could just say no need to thank me to Miss Shen in private. It wouldn't be difficult. The sunlight was not strong in the morning. There were many shadows of trees, and the clothes of the people in the palace were not much different. It's possible that Miss Shen made a mistake. So, this matter was just a misunderstanding from beginning to end. It was originally a good thing. Someone was brave enough to do what was right, and it deserves praise. If you think about it in a bad way, it would turn a good thing into a bad thing, which is inappropriate. Therefore, there is nothing to investigate in this matter. If you really want to investigate, just investigate the person who splashed water on your highness. It's not about anything else. How can you just walk away after causing trouble? At least admit your mistake. Sanjiu's words were clear and logical. Not to mention that concubine Shu and the third prince thought that was the case. Miss Shen couldn't think of any excuse or position to refute it, so she could only give up in dismay. So, I must have seen it wrong. There were also shadows of trees and reeds blocking the view at that time, so it is possible that I was dazzled. It's my fault. I shouldn't have regarded His Royal Highness the third prince as a lifesaver, just because he was wet. Sanjiu replied, that makes sense. We are all raised in seclusion. Who knows anything? When encountering something like falling into the water, it is natural to panic and have no idea. But what Sanjiu didn't say was that Miss Shen didn't look like she fell into the water, but looked like she was splashed with clean water. There are many water plants and duckweed in Taking Pond. It is strange that she can come out clean without any duckweed if she really falls into the water. But Sanjiu didn't want to make things difficult for her, so she saved her dignity. Miss Ao is really smart and clever. I didn't misjudge you. Concubine Shu was very satisfied. It was not a big deal. If it got out of hand, no matter what the result was, it would be embarrassing for her son. Sanjiu characterized the matter as a good deed of bravery, but there was a little misunderstanding. After a lot of fighting, even the waves were smoothed out. At least now there is nothing secretive in the eyes of everyone. Sanjiu also left room for Concubine Shu. If Concubine Shu was unhappy, she could still find out who splashed water on her son. If she was willing to settle the matter peacefully, it could be left here. Concubine Shu would not simply reveal her plan to outsiders. She ordered the maid to quickly send Miss Shen and the third prince back to their rooms to wash up, and those who should report to His Majesty the Emperor should report, and then do whatever they should do, and then they would disperse. Sanjiu also had to go back to report to the Queen, so there was no way to know what happened next. After this incident, Miss Shen completely settled down, and Sanjiu's reputation did have some rumors. Concubine Shu saw with her own eyes that he was extraordinary, so she had nothing else to complain about. When the Emperor and Empress learned that Sanjiu had solved the problem with just a few words, they were also very pleased. Basically, the marriage of the third prince was tacitly decided. Although there was a tacit understanding, the decree had not been issued yet because Sanjiu herself still had doubts. Sanjiu was ambitious. She did not regard her partner on the long road of life as important as Li Ju. She was not a virgin, nor was she a young boy with a fluttering heart. She had long passed the age of spring love. The world was very realistic for her, and she had no fantasy about love at all. She never concealed her ambition. She made it clear that, even if she got married, she would hold real power after marriage, at least the real power, to manage the industries related to the Li family. Li Ju gave Sanjiu a stage, and the third prince could give her a bigger stage. Li Ju allowed Sanjiu to glimpse a new world, and the third prince made it possible for Sanjiu to manipulate the rules of this world with her own hands. The marriage with the third prince was undoubtedly in line with Sanjiu's own ambitions. However, Li Ju seemed to have put a lock on this ambition. Sanjiu's hesitation was in Li Ju himself. It was true that she had ambitions, but she did not want to bring any risks or embarrassment to Li Ju. She could not let Li Ju be affected by her ambitions. If the marriage was really promised, Li Ju would inevitably be involved in the dispute over the throne. By then, even if Li Ju could produce 10,000 catties of grain per mu, his career and his ambitions would definitely be interfered with, just because of the throne. Sanjiu used the cost advantage and disadvantage rule taught by Li Ju to calculate again and again, but she really couldn't figure out which way was right, and she was entangled for a while. You have been in a dilemma recently, and this palace should know what's on your mind, so are you willing to talk to this palace? Sanjiu was entangled for 2 days. One day, the emperor went to court, and the queen asked Princess Chengyang to accompany her to check the items for the eldest prince's marriage. His marriage was in July, and everything entered the final preparation stage. So on this day, Concubine Shu took the opportunity to come to the pepper room to have a heart-to-heart talk with Sanjiu. Chapter 423, Recognition. Sanjiu hid her thoughts very well, but it was not that difficult for Concubine Shu to see through them. In a sense, Concubine Shu and Sanjiu are the most similar. They are both widows, both have ambitions and abilities, and both hesitated about remarrying. Concubine Shu is not as beautiful as Sanjiu, and does not have Sanjiu's rich experience, but Concubine Shu has been in the top wealthy families since she was born, married twice, and became a queen, and she has seen more hidden human hearts than Sanjiu. Sanjiu is not a person who likes to hide things, and Concubine Shu can easily see through Sanjiu's thoughts. Sanjiu bowed to Concubine Shu and followed her to the garden. Concubine Shu is nearly 50 years old, but because of her good maintenance, she looks young and still as smooth as jade. Are you afraid of married life? Worried that it will not be as good as you thought? worried that King Queer can't do what she promised. Kink is the nickname of the third prince. Concubine Shu said this in front of Sanjiu, and it can be seen that she really treats Sanjiu as her own family. Sanjiu replied in a low voice, I dare not, and that's not the case. I'm not afraid of the future, nor am I afraid of changes. Shu Fei was slightly surprised, but she understood in a flash, because of Marquis Feng Rang. Are you still concerned about him? How dare I? I regard Marquis Feng Rang as a brother. I care about him, but I have no private feelings. I believe that your Marquis Feng Rang is good in everything, but he is not open-minded. Even if someone says that he has something going on with him, no one will believe it. Shu Fei had a very good impression of Marquis Feng Rang. This man was handsome, but honest, with a long family history, very popular with the emperor and empress, but he was also a loyal minister. Being close to him would not only gain benefits, but also appear to have no private interests. In fact, he cleverly contacted some important ministers through various relationships. Sanjiu smiled and said, Your Majesty, you are wise. But, I also heard about another thing. The servants were pruning branches in the garden. Concubine Shu stopped one of them and picked a few hibiscus buds and lotus buds from the cut branches. She gave half to Sanjiu and the other half to her maid. I heard that the Empress wanted to match Princess Chengyang and Marquis Feng Rang, and His Majesty was willing. It's a pity. I'm afraid that this will be difficult to accomplish, because Marquis Feng Rang had a very ugly quarrel with Tai Fu Yang and Xiang Gangwu. So, His Majesty was a little hesitant. You said that you treat Marquis Feng Rang like a brother. Then do you know what your brother thinks? Sanjiu had nothing to say. As early as Chengyang arrived in Jinling, she keenly noticed that there was a very strange atmosphere between Princess Chengyang and Li Ju, an atmosphere that was difficult for others to interfere, and easy to be excluded. However, Chengyang was introverted, and Li Ju was dull, so this kind of feeling was difficult to be revealed. You may not understand the ways of the world, and therefore cannot see it, but I'm an experienced person and I can see clearly that Marquis Feng Rang is not necessarily ruthless. It's just that things are really difficult to deal with. Marquis Feng Rang has no followers and no one knows where he comes from. He has no desires and no demands, and we cannot find his weaknesses. His prestige in Jiangnan is so high, and your majesty loves and respects him now, but it is really uncertain in the future. How the next emperor will treat him is even more unknown. Sanjiu replied, Your majesty has taken the trouble to think about it. I think the master has nothing to hide from others. Your majesty and the princes are all very broad-minded and capable, so it shouldn't come to this. People should plan ahead. Things in the future cannot be determined now. Do you know why I like you and am willing for Sena to marry you? It's because you are determined to go all the way, but you also have to consider taking a step back before doing anything. This wisdom is really rare. This palace feels that Li Baxiu lacks a backer who will always stand by his side, and a vanguard who can open up for him in the future. There are some things I can't say clearly, so I can only give some suggestions. Do you understand what I mean? Sanjiu naturally understood. Shu Fei's meaning had two things in mind. First, it was for Li Ju's future. Marriage with the royal family was the best choice. With Chengyang's great favor, Li Ju would be absolutely safe, while the emperor and the queen were alive, and even safer than most princes. Second, it was still for Li Ju's future. If she became a princess, she would naturally be able to form a relationship of mutual protection with Li Ju. But we can't just listen to Shu Fei's words. Shu Fei is a concubine in the harem. Why does she think so much about Li Ju? Shu Fei's meaning was the other way around. She wanted to find some helpers for the third prince. If the royal family and Li Ju really got married, Li Ju would immediately be promoted to the super class, and Chengyang, the top pearl, would be his wife, and he would be protected by the emperor and the queen. As Li Ju's former subordinate, she had been involved with Li Ju for a long time, and could not be separated. Naturally, she could pull such an important person into the camp of the third prince. If there is someone who hopes that Li Ju and Chengyang will succeed, I'm afraid this person would think of no one other than Shu Fei. However, Sanjiu must say that this is indeed the best situation for Li Ju. Not only are there two benefits implied by concubine Shu, but there is also an implicit benefit. Among the princes, the one who has the best relationship with Li Ju, trusts him the most, and has the closest ambitions to him is the third prince. Helping the third prince may not be the same as helping himself. Sanjiu and concubine Shu are both smart people. In a flash, they have explained their respective considerations clearly in implicit and euphemistic language. Concubine Shu knows that her smart daughter-in-law and heavyweight arm are both stable, and Sanjiu knows how to set up security for Li Ju. Both parties are very satisfied with the results. However, Sanjiu still has to do two things first: resign from Fengrang Marquis's mansion, explain various tricks to Li Ju, and find out whether he really wants to start a family. Concubine Shu nodded here. The emperor and empress had nothing to say. Chen Guiyang also strongly recommended it, and the marriage of the third prince was settled. Sanjiu then proposed that she needed to go back to make arrangements with Li Ju and Yu Yaoniang. The queen readily agreed and instructed, when you go there, call the officials who will take over to come and see him. Marquis Fengrang is the nephew that your majesty cares about, and the officials are half of Marquis Fengrang. I must see them with my own eyes to feel at ease. Sanjiu nodded obediently. Yes, I remember. There is one more thing, which we talked about in private. I'm just suggesting it, and you can decide for yourself whether it is appropriate. That is, let Marquis Fengrang recognize you as his sister. You already have a brother and sister relationship, and the only thing missing is the name of brother and sister. You recognize Marquis Fengrang as your brother, and in the future, when you socialize in the capital, you will no longer differ from others. Sanjiu thought it was very good, and concubine Shu beside her was delighted. Concubine Shu urged Sanjiu to get married to Li Ju, but she was still a little worried that Sanjiu would really recognize brother and sister with Marquis Fengrang, and become the sister of the Marquis, which would cause complaints from the queen. Unexpectedly, the queen brought it up on her own initiative. Since the queen brought it up, it naturally meant that His Majesty the Emperor also thought so. So concubine Shu had nothing to worry about, and was only left with happiness and joy. Concubine Shu followed the queen, and said some nonsense like come back early, and said goodbye with satisfaction. When she returned, she had to carefully sort out all the personnel, affairs and finances, and prepare an additional suitable property for her son, to leave the palace and build a mansion. Time was very tight. Before she left, she glanced at Chen Guiyang, and said to the queen with a smile, "Your Majesty, I think the prince's wife can be remarried, so the duke's wife and the marquis' wife can also be remarried, right? The blood of the royal family is the same, and I think no one is more noble or special than anyone else." Chapter 424 Three Things. The implication of concubine Shu's words went into the queen's heart. The queen also looked at Chen Guiyang, who was very calm, as if concubine Shu was not referring to her. Her expression was so detached that she was almost out of this world. The queen couldn't help but resent the emperor in her heart. It took so long to get a feel for the situation, but the girls' school gave money to people very quickly. In the end, it was concubine Shu who helped to find a way to get Sanjiu to ask, so that the matter could be settled. The queen arranged a few people for Sanjiu, including women servants, palace maids and guards. All that was left was an order. Sanjiu had to learn the rules, etiquette and tacit understanding in the future. The earlier she started learning, the more proficient she would be. Preparing people for her in advance was the queen's love for the third prince, and no one could find fault with her. In this way, when Sanjiu returned to Lee Garden, she was surrounded by people and looked a bit ostentatious. The house where Li Ju lived temporarily was not big. How big could the place where Yang Mengson taught his disciples be? But it had houses, gardens and ponds, and was particularly exquisite. More than a dozen people poured into the small house at once, and it was crowded. As soon as Li Jiayu saw this situation, he knew that Sanjiu's matter was settled. Sanjiu did not show any shyness or joy, and was no different from usual, but her dress was a little more gorgeous, closer to Chen Guiyang. "Is it settled?" Li Jiayu personally entertained the guards sent by the palace, and settled them in the guest room. He asked Wu Da, Jeteng, Chu Sanshiba and others to accompany the guests. He asked Yaoniang, the mute, to accompany him and went to the backyard with Sanjiu to talk in detail at the stone table and stone bench under the crabapple tree. The crabapple tree in midsummer was lush and green, and the pergola made of climbing plants such as creepers and morning glory next to it was full of deep and light green, covering the sky and making the midsummer wind a little cool. Li Ju sat down on the outermost stone bench, with Sanjiu and Yu Yaoniang on his left and right. The mute stood behind Li Ju with his arms folded, and had no intention of sitting down to talk. He didn't understand those things. Sanjiu replied, "Yes, since your highness is very sincere, I also want to try my skills to see if I'm qualified to do something that can realize my ambitions." Sanjiu was willing, and it was a good thing, to marry a man of her dreams and get a friend in the same industry. Li Ju was mentally prepared and congratulated her. The mute made a congratulatory gesture with Yu Yaoniang. Yu Yaoniang was happy for Sanjiu, but she felt sorry for her master. However, it was not convenient to comfort Li Ju in front of Sanjiu, so she could only say a few words of congratulations. Sanjiu gave way for a while, before getting down to business. "I came back this time to discuss 3 important things with the master." Li Ju said, "3 things? I can only think of one. You tell me, as long as it's good for you, I'll agree to it." Sanjiu asked back, "Which one did the master think of?" "Your identity. Since I met you, although others treat you as servants on the surface, in my heart, you are all my brothers and sisters. This time I want to take the opportunity to really adopt you as my parents' adopted sons and daughters. In this way, Sanjiu and Yu Yaoniang will be my sisters, and Ada, Chusan, 18, will be my brothers. It would be best if we could change our surnames as well. Ada has already changed his surname to Li like me. If you two have no objection, you can also take my surname Li, or my mother's surname Liu. It's all fine." Sanjiu and Yu Yaoniang were both sold as child brides by their parents. Sanjiu lost her husband, and Yu Yaoniang was sold again by her in-laws. Their current surnames are not their original surnames, but the surnames given by their adoptive parents. Just like Xiaokao, the second daughter of the Fu family, the 2 girls didn't know their surnames, or where they came from. Yu Yaoniang was better, remembering that she had a younger sister, but Sanjiu didn't even have a trace of memory. In this situation, Sanjiu and Yu Yaoniang immediately expressed their willingness to share the same surname with Li Ju. Compared with the age of the 4 people, Li Ju and the mute didn't know who was older and who was younger. The mute recognized himself as the second brother, and Sanjiu and Yu Yaoniang were the 3rd and 4th. After changing their surnames, they could write the household register together when they went back, which was no different from brothers and sisters in ancient times. Sanjiu and Yu Yaoniang also took their own academic names. There was nothing to take, but it was just a code name. Sanjiu's full name was Zaire and Yu Yaoniang took Qiu. Just wait for Li Ju to report to the ancestors according to the process of this era and record it in the family tree, and the oath of brotherhood will be completed. This matter is the simplest, and the second matter is a little more difficult, which is the queen's desire to summon Yu Yaoniang. Yu Yaoniang was a little panicked when she heard this. Li Ju and Sanjiu comforted her together. Sanjiu said, "The queen is the most amiable, and you are so likable. This is not a difficult test. Just tell the truth to whatever the queen asks, and don't be coy or fake. Don't be afraid of the rules and etiquette. I have brought people to teach you. When the master goes to the palace for class tomorrow, I will take you in with him. When you enter the pepper room, I will be waiting for you there. With the master and me here, you don't have to be afraid of anything." Yu Yaoniang felt a little relieved when she heard that Li Ju and Sanjiu were accompanying her. Li Ju pointed at the mute and said that Ada had always accompanied him in and out of the palace, and nothing had ever gone wrong. Today's emperors and empresses are more tolerant when they go to the palace to pay homage, as long as they don't ask what they shouldn't ask, and don't look at what they shouldn't look at. That's enough. The second thing was not out of the ordinary. Li Ju just felt that the queen paid too much attention to him, which was nothing strange. Sanjiu then brought up the third thing. The third thing is a little bit related to the second thing. Yu Yaoniang is not suitable to listen to it. You should avoid it first. Yu Yaoniang walked away in response, but stopped halfway. She suddenly felt afraid that the third thing was related to her marriage. but she changed her mind and thought that Sanjiu gave up her position as an official because she was going to get married. It's impossible that she would be an official today and the queen would be satisfied with her and then she would be replaced soon, right? Thinking of this, Yu Yaoniang felt that it must not be her marriage. The officials of the Marquis mansion are Li Ju's confidants, and all of Li Ju's affairs will be known to the officials. But if there is one thing that Li Ju can't know but she, an official of the Marquis mansion, cannot know, then after thinking about it, it can only be Li Ju's own marriage. Before the dust settled, in order to protect the woman's reputation, Sanjiu kept the woman's identity confidential, and also to prevent embarrassment in the future meeting. Thinking this way, it makes sense. Yu Yaoniang is a little curious about who Li Ju will marry in the future, but not particularly curious who it is. What does it have to do with her? The subordinates are here to work, and it has nothing to do with the inner house family affairs. She is in charge of external affairs, while the Marquis's wife is in charge of internal affairs. She took over Sanjiu's work and dealt with the shopkeepers and accountants of various industries. The Marquis's wife was in the circle of noble ladies, and the two of them had nothing in common. She guessed correctly that what Sanjiu mentioned next was what the concubine Shu and the queen asked her to help find out about, which was about the marriage of Princess Qingyang. The third and most difficult thing is the marriage of Princess Qingyang. After Sanjiu finished speaking, she carefully stared at Li Ju's small movements. Seeing that his hands, which were naturally placed on the table, subconsciously clenched into fists, she knew that Li Ju was not completely heartless. Li Ju couldn't tell what he was feeling. He was very slow in this regard, but he could also feel himself unhappy. Your Majesty and the Queen, do you want to grant the princess another marriage? Yes. The queen is worried that the princess will lose her protection after she passes away, so she wants to find a marriage that can protect her for a long time. Li Ju asked, Your Majesty came to me with this intention before, and I have already suggested a solution to Your Majesty, which is to let the princess serve as the chief priest of the girls' school. In this way, the princess will have many students all over the world in the future. Maybe the future queen and crown princess will be the princess's students. Isn't that enough? Chapter 425, Marriage. Li Ju thought of the common women he had seen in Dayang, and thought of Yu Yaoniang and others, and became even more anxious. What's the good of getting married? What if I marry again, like the prince consort who knows a person's face, but not his heart? What if he has two faces in front of others and behind others? The princess is smart, has good eyesight, can study, and has her own ambitions. How can she be trapped in the boudoir? As a princess, she has married the wrong person once. Why can't she still get the grace to make her own decision? Sanjiu had heard the queen mention the girls' school, but she didn't know that the girls' school was first proposed by Li Ju, and she didn't know that Li Ju proposed this for Qingyang. After hearing Li Ju's question, Sanjiu was surprised at first, and then it became funny. If you say Li Ju is affectionate, he is too boring. If you say he is ruthless, subconsciously, in order to prevent His Majesty the Emperor from finding a marriage partner for Princess Qingyang, he can come up with any idea. He has never been so impatient for his own affairs. You are worthy of being you, the unpredictable Master Li. Sanjiu laughed and said, then, what if the Empress and His Majesty want to propose marriage, want to entrust their daughter to their life, and want to recruit her as a consort? Li Ju subconsciously wanted to say something, but suddenly became mute. He grabbed the stone table, and after being silent for a while, he suddenly blushed, all the way to his ears. In an instant, he thought of Qingyang holding the teaching plan after class at the school, tilting his head, and saying to him, after this class, if there is such a person who can figure out the transformation of potential energy, it will not be a waste of this trip. Qingyang at that moment was so exciting. Then Sanjiu understood. Master, don't say it. I can see from your expression that you understand. Master, don't worry, I know how to report. In fact, if you really admit it openly, it will be a good thing for me, if you are really recruited as a consort. Li Ju blushed and said nothing. Of course it is a good thing. Don't think that the third prince likes Sanjiu at this time, but you can't say what will happen in the future. Li Ju himself was far away in Jinling, and if something really happened, he would be out of reach, and could not rush back. But if Li Ju really became a consort, then no matter how things would change in the future, the third prince would have to give Sanjiu some leniency for the sake of Princess Yu Yaoniang. From this perspective, Li Ju certainly understood what Sanjiu meant by good thing. In fact, it was also a mutual achievement. Sanjiu agreed to the marriage because of Li Ju. Sanjiu did not make a wasted trip and did all three things beautifully. Especially for the third thing, the queen was very happy after hearing Li Ju's performance. She turned around and asked someone to add an extra amount of makeup to Sanjiu from her private room and asked everyone in the palace to call Sanjiu Miss Li. Even Xiaolian, who was far away in Jinling, was rewarded. Although Yaolang and Xiaolian had not yet consummated their marriage, Xiaolian had already received an imperial decree. With the marriage of the third prince settled, Miss Shen was completely out because of the drowning incident, and Miss Eluo was still granted marriage to the second prince as the principal wife. Miss Eluo and the other people in the Eluo family didn't think much of it. Life is nothing more than fighting. No matter how scheming you are, you can't do anything if you can't beat the opponent. 5 or 6 people can't subdue Miss Eluo, but Miss Eluo can use her martial arts to defeat others. As for the secret frame up, Miss Eluo is not afraid. Although it is rare for a tiger to be caught, as long as there is no handle, Miss Eluo will be safe in name. At most, the Eluo family will find a few more experienced veterans to help Miss Eluo. She is safe in public and in private. What's there to be sad about? Only Mrs. Eluo cried bitterly, but she had no way to disobey the order. However, the Queen Mother understood her love for her daughter, or perhaps she was moved by her own bitterness as a veteran whose daughter's marriage was not smooth. So the Queen Mother secretly made a promise to Mrs. Eluo, promising that no matter what, as long as Miss Eluo did not do the 3 things of treason in the future, that is, deceiving the emperor, being unfilial to parents, and colluding with the enemy and treason, she would ensure that Miss Eluo would not be implicated by others. Mrs. Eluo stopped crying. The queen's promise was a factor, but more importantly, Mrs. Eluo heard another hint from the queen. The queen knew that she was afraid of the future dispute over the throne, and she knew that the Eluo family had actually put their heart into this aspect. The Eluo family was in charge of so many soldiers and horses, and his family should not have such an idea, even if it was just a thought. It should not be. Mrs. Eluo had her own ideas, but after being warned by the queen, she immediately became sensible, wiped away her tears, and put on a smiling face, saying, "Then, I'll leave my useless girl to the queen to discipline." The queen still smiled and said, "Your daughter married my son, so she is my daughter. I will naturally treat her like a princess." Mrs. Eluo doesn't have to worry too much. Children and grandchildren have their own blessings. There is no such thing as worrying about everything in the world. As for me, I don't bother to care about Kange's affairs. I leave it to her to decide. Mrs. Eluo praised her a few words, laughed for a long time, and then dragged her heavy steps back. The marriages of the second and third princes were settled, and the marriages of other concubines were also arranged. In the capital, there may be arrangements for sons and nephews, or 2 families have fallen in love with each other. If they send a message privately, the emperor and empress will generally not make things difficult for others. Miss Shen was finally given a marriage with Liang Qi, a distant relative of the Liang family in Guangxi, who was now a lecturer in Beijing. There was really no other way. The incident of Miss Shen falling into the water that day was exposed. After the Shufei investigated thoroughly, the eunuch who splashed the water on the third prince and the implicated maids were all expelled from the palace. This was thanks to the fact that in recent years, in order to pray for the emperor's blessing, there were not many casualties in the palace. Otherwise some people would have lost their heads. As a result, the pressure on Miss Shen suddenly increased. She was worried every day, fearing that Shufei would find out about her, but Shufei did not announce the results for a long time, and instead pressed the eunuchs and maids on duty every day to find out the truth. Shufei clearly knew that it was Miss Shen who was behind it, but she kept keeping Miss Shen in a state of anxiety, almost forcing the young girl to go insane. Finally, Liang Qi, Miss Shen's childhood playmate, stood up and said that he saved Miss Shen when he passed by the garden on the way to lecture the prince that day. Concubine Shu asked again and again but Liangqi insisted, so concubine Shu asked the queen to grant the marriage. Liangqi's family was just well off. When Ma and Shen separated in the early years, it happened that Liangqi's house was next to their temporary residence. At that time, Miss Shen and Liangqi were only 4 or 5 years old, and there were not so many restrictions on their interactions, so they played together for more than half a year. Later, Ma managed her own business, and Liangqi moved to the capital to study for an exam. Since then, there have been more than 10 years, but there have been occasional correspondence. After Miss Shen was granted marriage, she could not say whether she was disappointed that her wish was not fulfilled, or she was relieved that she had escaped a disaster. In short, her mood was very complicated. Fortunately, Liangqi was well-mannered, talented, and down-to-earth. At least, this marriage was not considered to be marrying the wrong person, so Miss Shen accepted her fate. But when she woke up in the middle of the night, she couldn't help feeling upset when she thought of the wealth and glory that was only one step away. On the other hand, if Liangqi didn't take the initiative to accept the offer, concubine Shu might have chosen a marriage for Miss Shen that would disgust her. There might not be many other things in the capital, but there were many playboys with bad habits, complicated families, and tricky parents. If she was forced to go to such a family, Miss Shen, with her level of talent, would probably be tortured to death. Liangqi stepped forward to save Miss Shen. Concubine Shu admired his bravery. Considering that he was a scholar beside the emperor, she didn't want to cause trouble, so concubine Shu gave up and sent Liangqi and Miss Shen a wedding gift. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.